5. We'll go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got Commissioners Burton, Wampler, Barber, and Montgomery present, and Commissioners Torman and Commissioner Johnson. Is he? Yeah, he said it'll be enough. Great. Hopefully he makes it soon. We have meeting minutes from what looks like April 25th and May 2nd. I've not had any submissions for corrections. Are there any corrections that need to be made? Submissions. Not hearing any. The meetings as submitted are approved. And we move to adjourn to a work session where we can talk about ZTA 2023-4 work session to discuss water-wise landscaping ordinance amendments to implement Flip Your Strip program in unincorporated Weber County.
Awesome. So planning commissioners, this ordinance, this county initiated text amendment. It's been driven, we've been given some direction from the county commission to be able to update our landscaping ordinances and landscaping requirements in a way that allows residents of the unincorporated part of the county to take advantage of some incentives that Weaver Basin has started. You're probably familiar with some of these incentives. One of them is they call Flip Your Strip. Basically, if you take the lawn, the irrigated turf grass out of your park strip, they give you so much of a rebate back to hopefully help pay for some of the drought tolerant landscaping or rock that you would sell. There is another incentive where you can get a rebate for taking out your actual lawn and implementing some drought tolerant landscaping instead of turf grass. In order for people to take advantage of that, Weaver Basin has told us that we need to adopt some regulations for new development that comes in. And so what you've got before you is our proposal that we think does that. Now, I will let you know this is kind of the first draft copy that you're looking at. There's already been a few proposed changes that you'll see when we bring this back to you at a public hearing, probably next month is when we'll do that. But first thing I'll point out is you'll probably notice at the top of what we've drafted here, 108.712, that doesn't really belong in the order of it, right? It belongs technically underneath 108.14, but I put it at the top just so that you kind of can reference that that's the new code. Basically, what it says here, no more than 35% of the front and side yard of a lot or parcel. And that right there is a specific requirement from Weaver Basin. We have to have that in our standards. But we were also thinking this next part is something that we're throwing around the idea of is limiting the actual number of square feet regardless of your lot size. How many square feet, again, this is for new development. How many square feet of a residential lot should be able to have irrigated turf grass? We took the idea of 2,000 square feet. The one person on the Western League of Planning Commission said it seems like it doesn't seem a ton. Maybe bump that up to like 3,000 or 4,000, which we could do, but we would still be looking at 35% of front and side yard total. This next part is another requirement from Weaver Basin. The irrigated turf grass, a park strip, and any other yard area with a width of less than 8 feet is prohibited. When this comes back to you in public hearing, I will have added a C, a third section by then. And this is another rebasing requirement specifically for the program to flip your lawn instead of just the park strip. And that requirement is no more than 15% of your landscaping area. If you're on commercial, industrial, institutional, or multifamily project, no more than 15% can be lawn, basically irrigated turf grass. So we'll make sure to include that as well, so that both programs can be. These next sections, we just went through and wanted to make sure they were consistent with this new section 712 that was drafted. So you'll see 10814 line 10, that is referencing our design review chapter. Design review applies to commercial, industrial, multifamily, institutional uses. Another board. And it requires a minimum of 10% landscaping. That chapter already does say minimum 10%. You'll see on line 18, it used to say no more than 50% of your landscaping can be turf grass. And what we've done is just deleted that line, reference the new section. That's what your maximum area can be. The next section down line, starting on line, I will point out that we're on line 20. Some of this language, as it was previously written, water conserving landscaping methods and materials are recommended and encouraged. We really need to say that, or we're gonna just require it. So we're getting rid of some of that language, proposing to get rid of some of that language. Line 23 is section 108.2, which is the county's architectural landscape and screening design standards. This applies to pretty much everything in the unincorporated Weaver County except for the manufacturing zones in Western Weaver. So it actually says 20% of the total lot area needs to be landscaped. And we're making sure down here in B to reference what they're allowed to go, how many square feet they're allowed to go for irrigated turf grass in that new section. Down to section F on line 33, we're talking about how park strips need to look. Previously, it said that they needed to have a native grass mixture. Your basic requirements say that you can't plant any grass in your park strip, so we got rid of that. And we're saying that after quite a few conversations with our engineering office, we think that the best looking park strip in areas that have park strips have like what they call a 6-inch angular rock on your way into the building or when you're leaving. In our parking lot here, where kind of that darker rock is 6-inch angular. When we drafted this a few weeks ago, we were thinking about, should we require shrubs and grasses to be in those park strips? The planning commission, Western Weaver Planning Commission, their recommendation was maybe don't require that because rock can actually look pretty decent. They pointed out one in off of Coney in the south in the Uinta area that they did a pretty nice looking. It's only rock and it looks pretty nice. I think there's a way to do it. You guys have other thoughts? Let me know. We're thinking of just taking the requirement to have plantings in there out, unless there's a subdivision approved that it has to be trees. Next page, we're still in landscape screening design standards for like commercial uses and multifamily. Line 40, we're talking about plant material, what was previously in code. Going down to line 46, it gave ground cover an option. It used to say ground cover may be used in place of turf grass. To me, it sounded better just to have it say to meet landscaping requirements. So ground cover may be used in landscaping. If they want to plant some kind of growing ground cover and it doesn't need to be irrigated, I think it's pretty nice. So why not let them do that? So keeping ground cover is an option. Down to section F, eliminating the language that encourages drought tolerant. See, like eliminating some more encouraging language on 58 through 60. And then the last section, minimum standards off-street parking in areas between parking and the street. There previously was a requirement to install turf grass or ground cover, and we want to make sure that they're only limited to so much turf grass, as we've stated in this new section that we talked about at the beginning. So really just kind of cracking down on our allowances for turf grass so that Weaver Basin's happy, so that everyone can take advantage of Weaver Basin's incentive programs. Any thoughts, questions?
This is an incentive program to take out turf grass and put in drought tolerant stuff.
Yeah.
And so in order to qualify for that, you're saying these new developments, like, why not just not have them put in turf grass? I'm not trying to tell people what to plant, not that at the same time, if it's about offering them money to pull out turf, why would we say, like, why not just say don't?
That is what we're saying.
Okay, because it's just a lot of like, well, you can have this much.
So
Because won't we just be going back?
yeah, and the specific language of Weaver Basin, they've said we need to have this language, and their language does say no more than 35% can be turf grass. I think they understand that some jurisdictions like seeing turf grass, they still want to allow that. We can, if you think just not allow it at all.
No, I'm not trying to change it. It's fine with me. It's just, it seems like if you're offering money to people to switch out turf grass,
Just restrict it.
then just don't have them put it into, if it's new development, you're like, they haven't put it down yet, then don't.
Yeah. What do you think about, like residential subdivisions and things like that that come in? I mean, just thinking about.
Me personally,
Yeah, sure.
because I mean, that me personally is not what I would do, like, put down as a mandatory thing from a commission. Personally, from this point on, with the way that Utah's drought has been and everything, wild Utah, if it grows, it grows. Lush green grass in the desert is not very typical.
How do you deal with the island heat effect? Like if you're doing angular rock, like we all, your graduate programs in mine, we all learn about the island heat effect and what that's doing. So if you take turf out, I get it, and I want to be water wise, but like putting angular rock, which is holds a ton of heat, right? It feels like we're not accomplishing. I understand we need to save water, but are we doing the right thing? We're trying to do one thing good for water, but what's the consequence to the other side?
Right. Sure.
I'm asking it genuinely, did Weaver Basin come back and say, oh, this doesn't affect the urban island heat effect by, or the island effect by, by doing these things? I'm just questioning, because I mean, it's only been 4 years ago since I graduated in urban planning, and it was huge in that, right? How do we reduce that? So it feels like a big flip all of a sudden from that.
So who elected Weaver Basin to dictate this kind of stuff?
I don't think anyone did. It's just they have this incentive over anybody else, and people call our office all the time and say, I want to get money back from Weaver Basin, but they say because.
So Weaver Basin takes our tax money. And that says we'll get part of it back if you get on your knees and do what we say. Basically.
I didn't write the get on your knees part.
Yeah. Well, as you see it here, it would sound weird.
It's a form of tyranny. Somebody got it in his mind out there. Oh, we had a drought. We better command all the peons to follow our regulations.
So I was just showing Commissioner Montgomery that the incentive is pretty beneficial to a lot of property owners. Someone could get up to.
I'll tell you what,
$50,000 rebate.
If we were basing out the message, lower the taxes, if you got extra money to give away, then lower your taxes. Okay, now. I read in a book somewhere, what about the desert blooming like a rose? Now we're saying we can't bloom like a rose anymore, we gotta look like a desert.
And by that, I don't mean I'm not supportive, like if this is what the code, it's just. I mean, it's been taught for years and years of. When you take green out and add hard surface in, it is increasing the overall, I mean, that's just, whether you believe in that or not,
Mhm.
that's a real thing. Go play on a blue tennis court versus a green tennis court, that's a total difference. So,
It's the hockey stick thing. Okay, everybody, we got this global warming. How do you know? Well, the thermometers went up. Well, where are the thermometers? Well, it used to be in a farmer's field, and now it's in the middle of an asphalt parking lot. Well, of course it went up.
because black
Okay.
radiates heat.
So we got Weaver Basin apparently looking, little narrow view, we wanna be really showing how much we care, and we're gonna save the earth because we're gonna give people money back to tear out their landscaping. But they're not considering the bigger picture, which you bring up. Oh, what's that gonna do? All this heat. You know, you look at the Arbor Day Foundation, and they talk about the value of greenery and trees. I was a glider pilot. I understand where thermals come from. They come from rocks. They don't come from green fields and green grass. But this thunder putting all this heat in the air, now things are heating up. And we're gonna make a law that says they have to heat up in your neighborhood.
And that was just an idea. I really appreciate conversation. So I live in Ogden City, and Ogden City has implemented these requirements, if I understand right. And they actually, a few weeks ago, gave away a bunch of like drought tolerant grass seed for free. And so I assume that they're encouraging us to plant that. We'll also have to water it, but I guess the idea is less than I normally would in like turf grass. And so we could write something like that into maybe planting something like the drought tolerant seed into the.
I'm just taking what I learned, right? What I learned in my graduate degree was that, so I'm just looking for more clarification, but the thing is, you put grass in. And code enforcement's gonna get bugged about because it's over 6 inches, and the fire department's gonna get mad because they could burn your house down because the grass gets dry and drought. It's just like, there's so many dominoes that,
Right.
this is like a.
What happens if the guy's got the water rights, so decides to build this building, he's got the rights, and they take it all the way,
Water the dirt, water the rock.
have water rights to the code of draft that he wanted.
Yeah, they will.
Mandatory, telling them that they have to build a house in a field, and not gonna have this much, but they have the water rights for it.
It wouldn't be so objectionable to me if Weaver Basin said, hey, here's an incentive, here's a carrot. Tear out your lawn, we'll give you some money. They're saying, okay, you're gonna make everybody not have any lawn anymore. And then we'll give you some money.
How much lawn do you think is like reasonable for maybe a 3 acre lot?
As much as you want. I think it depends on.
If you have the water rights.
I think all of the requirements they're asking are fairly ridiculous. It's like, let people do what they want. And the only thing, I guess, like what you saying is. They shouldn't have to pay for it, right? I mean, it's like, well, and then that money can be used to incentivize if we want, shouldn't be coming from our general taxes, but if I want to pay for law like that. Or if I have the water rights, I mean, that's my prerogative. If I don't, then I can take advantage of it, but I don't like that you have to, they're saying, hey, everybody has to be this way, then we'll let you with the programs. The program should be open to people.
They're not, and they, keep in mind, it's only applying to new projects, right?
But it's like, hey, if you change your code to be how we want it, then we'll give you access to the.
Steve and I had the same conversation, we've got the same issue, like, just let's have the carrot. Don't make us change the code of, everybody.
Isn't there already a gate by Weaver Basin only allowing so much water rights per well? So just
Yeah.
for a new, so someone has a new 3 acre lot, they're gonna drop a well. They don't get as much water as they used to, which means they can't, even if they wanted to, do is whatever they wanted with irrigation or with planting.
Weaver Basin will let you buy. You can just keep buying.
You can just buy more. That just gives you 0.45 acre feet,
Yeah.
gives you enough for your culinary plus, I can't remember how many square feet of extra irrigation, so you could just buy another one.
They're not.
I was told you couldn't.
They just
Maybe
changed
that's
it
new.
this year.
They did.
Yeah, so you used to be able to get 1 acre
One,
foot per
right.
residence, but that was only for 8,000 square feet of lawn. And so if you had more than 8,000 square feet of lawn, you were supposed to go and buy more, and they would sell you it incrementally by quarter acre. But this last year, they have said, no more than 0.65 acre feet per residence regardless.
So do you sell 0.45 or 0.65?
0.65
So it's
for
0.6.
residents, 0.45 for indoor use, and the remaining portions for outdoor, which is about the equivalent of 3,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet. I can't remember. It's kind of where we
So
came.
you're right.
from.
You're right. You can't.
So that's the limiting factor then, right?
Unless
If someone's monitoring.
Unless you go buy
Yeah,
water.
there's a fallacy, Charlie, I think you and I have talked about this. Their measurement is based on alfalfa, which is the highest water
Mhm.
intensive crop in the state of Utah.
Yep.
Well, what if you put in a drip system and some natural little grasses and stuff? You're not using that much.
Mhm.
So it's not per square foot,
Mhm.
it's per volume of water.
Okay.
And if you are limited in the volume of water and you wanna have some stuff, okay, figure out how to water it without using more than your water water.
Why don't we just do that, Steve? Why don't we just say, if it's per water, right, you get your 8,000, they took it down from 8,000 to,
2,000 or 3,000 up to. the
so it's down to
maximum,
3,000
Well,
unless
it's-
you supply an additional water right. Why don't we just say what perk you can legally have by water right up there and just go with that?
So
Seems more clear cut. right?
Beaver Basin told us we have to say no more than 35% of the front and side yard. So we have to have that language in there regardless.
What about the backyard?
Somebody's gotta push back
We
on
don't
it.
restrict,
You guys, somebody's gotta have the guts to push
Doesn't make
back.
sense.
And say, no, you
Makes no
shouldn't be
sense.
doing this.
I just don't understand if we have to, why we talk about it.
But I also don't understand.
We don't have to adopt anything. This is voluntary.
Why oh, no, you're okay. I guess one conversation. Why, I guess if they're telling us we have to put it in here.
They're
Why
not.
Oh, okay.
What they're saying is if you want to be part of the essentially turf buyback program.
Oh, it
if
has
you-
to be in the code.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we went with what or Western Weaver wanted to do, and Ogden Valley says, we don't even want to mess with it, then folks out west would be able to do the turf buyback, but in the Ogden Valley would.
That would be my motion.
Well, I got, so.
I would motion.
A guy might fill with 300 feet of water. That's enough to water grass, and basically they're telling them we can't do that anymore, so you cannot have any grass, but you have to water to support what you're doing. And it's been grandfathered in from the fifties. And now they just took those from me, because you can't have grass.
I think most or all the calls I received about wanting to be in this program have been out in the Western Weaver planning area. I'm trying to think of any in Ogden Valley.
I don't know whether there's more homes that qualify, meaning there's more like 3/4 acre or smaller.
That have been choked to an acre foot of water, which could.
Yeah, where it makes more
The water to.
Up in the valley, it's 3 acres. It's
Three acre lot, where's the park?
Most of them are. There's no real-
You're just kind
I
That's
don't
what
think
I'm
there
trying
is
to
a
say. I was
park
like, what?
strip up
I
in the
don't-
valley, really, that people are watering. I have one. but-
Charlie's drawings have park strips on them and the
They
can't,
do.
they loved them. Everyone loved those swatter strips, like they loved them.
Water strips, I love it.
The Center Island.
So,
Yeah, but that would be my view. Water rights. It's not water to support it.
well, should we could make a motion more or less to say that if we wanted to, right? And I think that would be a pretty.
Did you
quick
say
message.
that there will be a public hearing on this?
Yeah, probably in July. Next month. We'll do it.
But as far as the motion, it would give us a clear, this is what we think, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, just leave people alone. You limit it on water. They have the ability to use, plant water retention. They have the ability to use drip irrigation and use their water allotment as they choose. Just don't put artificial stuff. You can only have so many square feet it is. Or if I can water it. It doesn't matter. You can only have what we tell you.
And maybe it should go off of your acre feet of water, because if you have 3 acres trying to do it off of 1 or 0.64, it doesn't support it. But if you have 3.5 per acre. You're entitled to the water.
Okay, I agree with the chair. I think if, at the public hearing, I could be swayed if all of a sudden 100 people show up and they all want to be on the program. But I mean, if no one's talking and no one shows up for it, That means no one wants it for now. We can readdress it if people start to want it, but I don't know why we would do it. It just doesn't make sense from science, what I've learned from my education. None of it makes sense. And then
Have us support the water. right?
doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to take people's
My
rights.
neighbor is the only one that has all rock in the front yard, probably in the whole valley. And it looks beautiful. But you just didn't want to put grass, he put a lot of trees, it looks great, but, I mean. we
Is
didn't
that,
have an
is that the
incentive.
one towards the elementary school?
Mhm. And then when he first put it in, everybody's like, whoa, but then when they brought in all the trees and everything, it came together very nice. And he didn't have an incentive, so if he wants, but my point being, people can do what they want to do, and I think they should be able to, and we shouldn't be trying to tell them, and I think that's what this is just trying to tell people what they should do, I mean. And I would not support it, if they want to if they don't want to put restrictions on it and have a program, then that's great, and people can use it, and that's great, but if they're gonna ask us for restrictions, I wouldn't be interested in it.
Isn't there also, there's a state program, right?
This is it.
This is it.
Yeah, so we're talking about, we were basing tax dollars. It's not, it's statewide tax dollars. The legislature is funding this, but they're funding it through each conservancy district.
Okay, so the state program that I've read about where the state would offer money to homeowners that want a zero-scape or HOAs that want a zero-scape or whatever,
This is
that's
it.
this.
That's this program.
So just, what we'll do is we'll just do it in Western Weaver, and then that option won't be available in Ogden Valley.
Mhm.
We can always revisit it later.
Yeah, if we get residents that show up and want it, like Steve said, we only have people from Western Weaver call about it, not up in the Ogden Valley, so you can just exclude it.
I'm concerned more about the principle. I know people, if they qualify, yeah, I want some money,
Mhm.
right? I got a brother-in-law, he's tearing out his whole front yard.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, and he's a scientist. Wrong kind of, but it's the principle of freedom. I mean, like Mr. Burton is, we think the best looking. And why, well, who is we? How about the homeowner? It isn't what matters, what he thinks is the best looking. Yeah. So that's what we ought to be protecting and looking out for, is the individual owners. Let's just not get in their face and say, well, we think you ought to do this, and therefore we're gonna make you do it.
Yeah.
That's a bad principle.
And it might be good for you guys, if you want to contact your state legislatures and talk to them about this and, let them know that, we shouldn't have to be doing this to be getting the rebate.
Yeah, if you wanna encourage, why encourage?
Am I missing something? So the only people that would be held accountable to this are the people who are applying for the rebate, no?
Any new applications that comes.
When you say new applications for this program,
No, sorry.
any new development?
Any new development.
Oh, I did not get that part. Okay, I thought it was just for application. I was like, oh, if they're applying for it, what do I, I'm
They're
like,
restricting, they're taking.
just everybody. Okay, I missed that part. I missed that. I was like, who cares? They're applying for it.
That is the group that's telling us what we have to do for that are unelected.
I know, I get that. I just didn't realize this is like gonna go out to everybody.
Why?
Yeah,
Full
your,
stop.
your next new house that you build to be this.
Okay.
It's kind of like federal agencies saying, if you want this education funds, or you want these funds for roads or something, you'll do it all the way. Or you won't get the funding.
Yeah,
Everybody-
that's,
Everyone that drives in the valley, what do they all say? Especially right now. I love how green,
It
I
is.
love how everybody's just so green. Take that away, right? I get that there's water, I understand that. Agriculture has its own takings of that, but there's ways to solve it. I don't know, this is one of them.
look, it's also just not what I read. When I read about the state program, it did not say. I think it was just if you, like, we encourage people to be more drought wise, and therefore that we money incentive for people who want to set up. It wasn't about changing everybody's thing. It was if you want to do it. That's what I read in the paper.
They do a good job marketing to this.
They got me, so that's why I was like, oh, whatever, but. That, I mean, because like I know the Moose Hollow HOA, which is a decent sized HOA in Ogden Valley, they have it on their plan to xeriscape. And the only reason they haven't completed it is because of the finances. Now they have to do roofs and everything, but getting money back would be an incentive to start that program and put it on the financial books. But if in order for them to do it and get some money back, every single house in the valley has to conform, then that's not right. Yeah, that's not right.
There's other programs too, besides just this one.
Okay.
At least I'm not, I work with other conservancy districts, because they'll help you draw plans and they give you, you pay for the plans and you get like 100 grand as a development. You get like 100 grand back just by helping them design low flow heads and stuff, so.
Okay.
But that's that application.
You have my vote. That's what I got.
I think some of these more strict rules are unique to Weaver Basin. So I could be wrong on this, but I think the legislature gave each conservancy district a little bit of latitude to adopt their own rules on how to administer the program. So I think that's where this.
They took those liberties.
Yep.
Alright,
And they complain about dust coming off the Great Salt Lake because there's no grass out there.
Right.
So with that, trying to move things along a little bit, do we want to like have we would, this will be revisited, I'm sure. But at this point, do we want to make a motion that we can all vote and either support or not support? So at least we have a clear message, is my point. I guess what I want is a clear message. I want Charlie and Steve and Rick to know exactly how we feel.
Is it gonna be a formal vote or should we just take it?
No votes, just,
Oh, yeah, it's a workshop.
I would say no.
Consensus.
So I guess we can, I mean, it's the same principle though, of like, hey, why don't you say something and I'll say I agree? Is that something we can do?
but this
Because that way it can be clear.
there's not a
Just
first
give
and
us
a second.
direction.
Yeah, okay, I mean. Since I'll make a motion, since I'm not making motions, right? I would, my response or my thoughts on this is that we should not. Be involved in the program based on restrictions that are being put forth. And I'm not willing to make those changes or based on what they're trying to tell us. And, based on the water concerns of having water rights and the concerns of grabbing power. And I would say that we shouldn't participate in the Flip Your Street program in the Ogden Valley.
I agree with that. I really would add to that, I'm concerned about taking away the power for an individual landowner, homeowner, to landscape his yard as he sees fit within the constraints of the water he has.
I agree with
We
you.
don't need to.
Design it with your water right that you want.
Yeah.
It'll support them.
I agree.
Agree.
Appreciate that.
I have sort of one question, related to this, but not directly. What do we think about homes that are built and they just leave it go to raw dirt, don't make any effort to landscape at all?
I think that's where the HOAs come into play.
No HOA, just out on a 3-acre plot somewhere. And is that in code right now at all anyway?
No, you're not required to put any type of landscaping in the front.
Not for single families. Other types of uses. I would think.
I think we do have some code that say you gotta leave it natural.
Yeah.
Well,
We do,
yeah,
there's the-
construction
Hmm?
debris or-
I think it's in the cluster code.
No, but I'm thinking of Nordic Valley, when we're talking about, they have this much and the rest you have to leave natural vegetation.
So my outlook is that around here versus an area that I had experience with in California, when they build a home, they just go to town and just tear the natural terrain up without any regard, whereas an area I'm speaking about, there's a code that cordons off where you're allowed to disrupt based on what you're building. And you can't set 1 foot out of that or the contractor gets fined. So when the project's done, there's always a natural perimeter surrounding the construction project of undisrupted land. It's a little different type of land than here, so it's not exactly, but they just make a giant effort to keep it tight
and not disrupt.
It's called area of disturbance.
Yeah.
Dealt with it like.
And down in the valley, I think it would help. Certainly at Powder Mountain, it would help a lot. Up there,
In that area of California, is it more like just like a desert lands?
no, it's alpine.
Okay.
Yeah, we have those with requirements and areas of disturbance already on the plans that I see, everyone.
Mhm.
You put up the fence, and you stay out of there.
Yeah, but it just doesn't seem like, at least by my eye, around in the valley, that they're very tight. More than anyone cares. When I built my home, they did not care. I really tried to get them to stay. They didn't care.
There is
Because
usually,
they knew there were no consequences besides myself hollering at them.
It's a good point. I mean, there is kind of a different climate than there is in the valley than there is out here. So it can be left more natural up there. I feel like them living out here, you're gonna get more weeds and things like that, so. yeah.
Wouldn't take long for the weeds to take, the natural vegetation to take over that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. We kind of expect that at the public hearing. And Commissioner Torman will be surprised by just that we've already kind of talked about it all, so. That was all I had. Thank you.
All right.
Ready to move on?
Move on. I have actually, we have a visitor, I guess, one. Which one are you more interested in?
Well, I'm Jay Olson, I'm with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and my new assignment is to help zoning, county planning to incorporate water and land planning together, and I'm just here listening. It's been a very interesting conversation. Some of the things you discussed are, I think the facts are a little mixed up, but that's okay. I mean, I don't think you lose your water rights, but it depends on whatever you have beneficial use. We can base it provide a lot of water to, and get a lot of water rights. So if they're used, if that water right goes to the basin, and even if you don't use the full amount that you have, it's still being used, it's still not lost. But there, I mean, I'm just here as a resource you can use if you need. I mean, I'm interested in your conservation, other things, and protecting agriculture, land protection, program and everything.
Into the right meeting.
I mean, I'm
Glad you're here.
here to observe the stuff and people. If you want me to call me, I don't have to.
Are you from the Ogden Valley? Are you from-
No, I'm from Sandy County.
Okay.
That's right.
It is good.
Yes, sorry.
Appreciate you being here.
When you're in agriculture, you gotta have another way to provide a farm. That's what I'm trying to do. So, you know. But
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is conservation.
Yep.
You're gonna go to ecotourism after that. Okay, so this one I didn't prepare anything for you guys. I just wanted to get the ball rolling on having a conversation. Doesn't have to be a big long conversation. I talked to the county commissioners. They said they'd like to see this get going as well, but I wanted to make sure I was going in the right direction first. I had a landowner shortly after we were looking at the Eden Crossing possible amendments to the form-based code. Landowner came in, I think it was actually the very next day, and said, my mom's about to pass. She has one dying wish, and that is that we put most of the property in a conservation easement. But in order to do so, we're gonna have to divide out part of our property from where the piece of property that has a single family residence on it. They were still willing to keep that piece of property with the single family residence to 1 acre. But the rest of it would be essentially go into a conservation easement. And that kind of got my wheels spinning. Actually, after talking about John's project or Eden Crossing, and like talking about all the development, and a lot of people really focused on new development happening. I wanted to see if we can reorient some of our focus onto conservation and onto green spaces. Because even though we do see development happening in some places, it's moving from somewhere else. And so I thought this would be a really great opportunity to work on some kind of a conservation oriented subdivision. Just off the gate, off the cuff, was thinking we could allow lot sizes as small as half an acre, or whatever size you guys want, as long as it's not granting more density, and the rest of the property would essentially go into that conservation easement. So if somebody has 30 acres of land, that gives them 10 lots, they could get 10 lots. Probably, we should probably restrict it to existing infrastructure, so we're not seeing new roads cutting through some of those open spaces. So 10 lots right up against the road, and then the rest of it go into the remaining 20 acres, so go into a conservation. So, you guys like the idea? Do you want to play around with the numbers?
Isn't it like a cluster? Yeah.
It's a little bit like cluster,
What's
yes.
the difference?
So with a cluster, you could build whatever design basically you want. And honestly, this guy could potentially do a cluster subdivision up in that area. But there are a lot of rules with the cluster subdivision code. And administration of that's a little challenging. I'm just thinking something really simple, really cut and dry. If you've got acreage that's going to go into a conservation easement that the land trust or the Department of Ag or any other entity that is a third party conservation easement holder is willing to take on, great, let's get you smaller lot sizes so that you can put the most amount into that conservation.
When you say conservation, it's not the retired density, right?
And so you're not retiring the density, you're just moving it up closer to where the infrastructure is.
So that's a cluster, so
Yeah.
conservation easement is essentially you have to prove your development, right? You get it, I'm just.
So
So
if
you
we're
have to prove
looking,
your- and then your retired density, right? So I have 100 acres,
Mhm.
I can do 30 things-ish.
Yep.
And I say, I will show Rick and you guys that I can do this, total pathway, then I retire all 30, that's conservation.
so that's the IRS method of getting essentially the write-off for a certain period of time. And that'd be ultimately the way to go.
Just that word, that's what I'm going to. So
Yes. So I mean, maybe the word isn't conservation in that case. I'd rather not use the cluster code for this purpose because the cluster code is challenging. It's a little clunky. It works in some situations, but that's usually when you're developing more of the internal portion of your property. If you're just right up against an existing roadway, we could make 1 or 2 paragraphs, really cut and dry. On how to.
So if I'm picking this right, I'm thinking of the general plan's premise to maintain open space, green space. That doesn't do it when you ring an open space with a bunch of little lots, so you can't see the open space, it's hidden back
It's true.
somewhere else, whereas a cluster subdivision, you kind of have everything in one corner,
Yeah.
sort of, and then everything else is generally open.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I thinking of it correctly?
You are thinking of it correctly, yeah. Our cluster subdivision ordinance says it needs to stay in one cluster unless separating the cluster is beneficial to the natural environment or something to that extent.
like topography makes it so it's better.
Yeah, or you got a river riparian area corridor or something like that.
I didn't hear it in your story about the mom wanting to do a conservation, that's her dying wish or whatever. I didn't hear the part where they wanted to create development.
So there, in that particular case, there's already a home
Right, one
on
home.
a parcel.
Isn't this what the Ogden Valley Land Trust does? You just carve out that one home and the rest goes to the land trust?
Now that one home, if it's on less than 3 acres, is a non-conforming, well, it's an illegally created non-conforming.
Is it in? But it's already there. It's already
I
there.
was gonna say, is it in a form because we have.
No.
Can it be by
Yeah.
cluster?
Actually, I think.
And then
I think
therefore
it
it's a
could be.
small lot size?
I think that even if it's in a form-based area, I think that's would be ideal even there to have big open spaces. So
The house is there.
back to your question, the house is there, it's on 4 or 5 acres or something like that. They want to shrink that lot down to, they want to do an acre. I got thinking about this, thinking, well, you know, why not half an acre? Why not a quarter acre? Acre's fine as well. That's what the old zoning is. There's a lot of acre lots in the valley right now. But they would have to shrink that lot to an acre.
Couldn't
And
they
right
just
now
apply
the
for
codes don't allow that. to
non-conforming?
happen. Sorry?
Why can't they just apply for non-conforming?
there isn't a process for that.
Or what is it called?
Special exception.
Special,
They would have to do a variance,
yeah, variance.
but it'd be very hard for them to get a variance.
You have to show your hardship.
So this is one
The
home.
hardship with not being able to donate to a
I don't know
conservation.
how many acres it is, it's quite a bit. of acreage.
Well, it can't be based on economics.
Well, that wouldn't be. on-
Prior to A1 zoning, I'm
Donate
guessing.
land To a conservation.
Okay.
So what's the
So-
downside of allowing them to create this 1 acre parcel where the house already exists? And then put the rest in a land trust? Is there a downside?
It's
To
just
that?
smaller lot sizes.
But that, it already exists. That house isn't going to be torn down, is it?
No,
But not retire the density.
what's that?
They're trying to not retire the density.
That's right.
Wait,
So that's
Wait.
not a land trust.
wait, why wouldn't you be retiring density? I thought the whole dream was the conservation.
What do they do if they aren't gonna retire the density?
Wait, but
They're gonna try and sell it? Is that the idea?
So. No, that's not the intention in this case, and we can write the rules however we want to say that we can't use it for a TDR. But their intention is if there's any potential development rights out of the property, it would be to just change the lot standards to allow them to do smaller lot sizes so they can conserve a greater amount of open space.
To me, it just seems more logical in conformance with the general plan if you allow the greater part of that land to be donated and then make one small lot.
Mhm,
That seems reasonable. Chopping it up into a bunch of small lots seems
mhm.
not in conformance with the general plan.
When you say chopping, are you talking about the greater piece or?
Well, even the peripheral pieces. So, you know, if you allow them to sell off a bunch of little pieces,
Mhm,
why not just allow them to have one little piece and donate the rest?
sure.
Or sell the rights, the
Which I think-
TDR.
I think we can do now. We would have to do it through a development agreement, because essentially we would be waiving certain rights, I guess, or sorry, certain requirements and obligations of the code. So we have to write those rules and they would have to sign it, but I was thinking maybe we can do this on more than just a one-off basis. Maybe we can write an ordinance where more than just this family can take advantage of it. But if it's not, if it doesn't feel right, then it doesn't feel right. We don't go in that direction.
So, back to the facts, we got a 4 to 5 acre parcel now,
Mhm.
and there's an existing home, and it was built when it was 1 acre zoning.
I would guess 1 acre, it might have even been before that. I haven't looked at the history of it.
So assuming that's the case, it's, he would have the potential to put 1 3 acre parcel on there, because he's got 3 acres,
Mhm.
and he's got a legal, non-conforming 1 acre lot. So he's got the existing home is on a legal, non-conforming lot, 1 acre.
How did he get it onto that 1 acre?
He built it before there was zoning or when it was 1 acre zoning or whatever. It's just always been. At the time it was built, he was allowed to build on 1 acre. So he's got a 1 acre lot.
Right,
Well, no, didn't he, isn't this a single parcel
Yes.
that's 4 acres or 5 acres?
so in order to go back to the 1 acre, he would have to subdivide and he'd have to comply with existing zoning rules.
Yeah, he never built on a 1 acre lot, he built on
On
a
a
5 acre lot,
5 acre parcel.
a 5 acre parcel, yes.
So that's how big the whole piece of land is total.
No, they've got several different fragments of property that a number of other family owners.
Is it
or
contiguous?
Family members own. It is contiguous.
Is it currently farmed?
I do not think so. Just thinking of the aerial. I haven't been on site, but I don't think the aerial showed this farm. It's actually kind of up in Commissioner Montgomery's neck of the woods.
Okay.
For me, go ahead.
If it had been built on a 1 acre parcel, it would be legally conforming. And
Correct.
he'd have 3 or 4 acres, then he could do another deal.
Yeah.
But what he wants to do is say, okay, I just want to have this house on a 1 acre lot, and I want to donate the rest to a land trust and be done.
Yes.
No, they want.
No, because you just said they want to
bunch of
sell a
little-
bunch of rights or something,
They want to sell.
or
bunch
develop a
small
bunch of
lots
rights.
On perimeter.
Because otherwise it's easy enough, but
So the suggestion or the idea that I had was creating a method by which this can be applied to more than just this one landowner.
So
This one landowner, it's just the single parcel.
Just as I described,
Yeah, just as you
you
described.
just want to have 1 acre and then wait the rest to a land trust that's forever tied up.
That's right.
Okay,
Cause your other.
you're talking about doing an ordinance that goes, that could be used in other situations. Maybe somebody has 30 acres.
That's where the 30-acre example comes
Okay,
from.
so that's the little lots.
Yep.
And you suggested, well, as long as we could go down to 1 acre, as long as it's along the existing infrastructure.
Mhm.
And then we have this big open space that we goes into the land trust, so we'd have 10 acres in houses and 20 acres in land trust.
Or some configuration of that, sure.
So we're talking about 2 different things.
So
Hey,
One
does it
thing-
go in the land trust or do you just squash those development rights?
Do it.
By,
I don't
by,
think it is even the land trust, just conservation in general, or is it donated to the Ogden Valley Land Trust?
So to have a conservation easement, there needs to be someone who holds that easement.
So it doesn't have to be the Ogden Valley Land
It
Trust.
does not have to be the land.
but something like that.
It could be just a trust
Could
that
be.
you create.
Well, if that trust is for the purpose of being a land trust.
Yeah. So I guess 2 thoughts and questions that you probably ought to clarify. Is this some kind of like, oh, well, we're talking about high density, let's get something that kind of changes the topic, as you mentioned earlier. That we don't really need in that we have clustering, what's the difference, right? And then what's the difference, right? What I cluster, isn't that ground already dedicated to be open space? So what's the difference?
Yeah,
Right,
so-
like, why are we doing this? I guess some of my questions is like, why? Like, why do we spend time on this when we can already currently do it? And I'm really asking, like, I don't understand.
I think it's
And is
time and
this just to
expense.
be like, hey, guys, we are not high density, right? Like, or what is the point here?
Seems like time and it just makes it easier and faster to get it going. The cluster takes more effort, more
But
infrastructure.
also, hasn't that been more thought out?
No, I
And
agree.
That
I
like,
think,
hey, we put those rules in the cluster for a reason.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with that.
And it's already passed through everything.
yeah, I mean,
Here's the first thought that I had when you mentioned this, because you and I discussed some years ago. Well,
Put no
someday,
restrictions in
this
this.
3 acre fronting is gonna disappear, there's just gonna be such demand, there will be infill everywhere.
Yep.
Okay, if that's the case, so hypo number 1, we got a 3 acre lot, bunch of 3 acre lots. House, 3 acre. When this infill comes in 50 years or 20 years or something like that, we're gonna have other houses popping up because they upzoned it.
Right.
And now we got houses everywhere. So I thought what you're trying to get at is, if there is some mechanism, somebody could say, okay, now, I wanna have my 1 acre lots now, but I'm gonna take this forever out of the ability to be developed in the future when this upzone happens.
That is exactly what this would do.
That's a
But
different.
a cluster subdivision would do the same thing.
It would. A cluster subdivision allows the county to own conservation easement. I do suggest that we change that to a third party. I think a third party would be a different kind of steward to that. And so that's something. Western Weaver doesn't want to use the cluster code anymore. It's not producing the results that they would like to see out there, but I still think it has a lot of good value for the Ogden Valley. For the reasons that we're talking about here. And so I think we can just make those tweaks and adjustments.
Can't the cluster subdivision on the open space too?
In a cluster, an individual, an HOA or an individual would own that. But an easement has to be placed on it in favor of the town right now.
Doesn't Summit own the barn parcel that's an open space?
Mhm.
Isn't that the same concept? Like Summit owns it, but yet the barn parcel is
Yes.
density, part of the ZDA, part of the development.
He was part of the development agreement.
So that's quite a bit the same as what we're talking about.
My only concern is like, I feel like I'm like 30% smart, but like, I just couldn't understand it, so. But one thing I do applaud is that you always try and work with the applicant, and try and find a way, so I don't want to squash that either, but if there's something, I agree, like if the cluster works.
If we have a way, but like the Bailey Acres, they have the cluster subdivision and then common ground. It's the same thing, right? They've got 1 acre lots, they moved it over here and left it open space.
That's right. The requirement for that open space area, like theirs is not held in third party at all. That wasn't adopted until
I tell you what,
about
I
5
would
years ago.
support, if we wanted to do something like what you said, that's easy, as long as they retire the density rights as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what I thought we were doing.
Yeah, so if we're gonna do conservation, we're conserving density rights too, we're not trying to
It's
manage.
just an easier path to a conservation. easement.
That's
Yeah.
where you.
How do they monetize that? This conservation, you can monetize density. How do they?
In this particular case, if you're not working through the IRS,
You're not monetizing it. So you're not using that conservation easement, the true conservation easement. This is a pseudo.
it's just
They'd be
somebody.
selling lots, right?
No, in this case, we're saying.
Yeah.
What
Well, what you're
Chair's
saying,
saying is,
Yeah.
you'd retire density and you wouldn't go through the whole process here saying, could you actually
That would
get?
be an easy way.
right, that's what you lost when you said they wanted to conserve, and then there's, but they want to do this development, I was like, what, that.
So
two different things
30
don't.
Yeah, so conservation,
Would say,
let's
okay,
look at the bigger picture, so we're all talking the same language. Conservation means conservation of a piece of property, right? It doesn't mean that the edges can't be developed. Right? And so I could see why we would think conservation means we're wiping out the development rights. So, and I'm not opposed to that at all. I'd be more than happy to make sure we get that in the code to say, you know, development rights are forfeit.
Or go through the cluster.
Or, yeah, so either go through the cluster or certain amount of development rights are forfeit. What development rights? How many development rights? All of them?
See here, you're going in a dead end street here. Cause I've told you this story before, the guy that built the house on top of, monastery up on the mountain.
Mhm.
And I can't remember what meeting we were in, and his caretaker came. And the meeting was about how do we make sure this can never be developed? We're gonna make it 5,000 acre zoning,
Mhm.
okay? And the caretaker said, you guys are nuts. The owner is in the process of trying to work out some donation of this to a conservation group,
Mhm.
so we can get a tax write-off.
Mhm.
As soon as you pass this ordinance and you say,
He doesn't get it.
oh, there is no value, there's
Mhm,
no way he's gonna do it.
mhm.
I don't think we're going the wrong direction, and what I mean in that same scenario, what I'm saying is, I'm gonna scale it down. You have 30 acres and you want an easy way to donate it to the conservation, and it's like, okay, your 10 development rights, you're donating 5 or whatever. You can go ahead and do it. You can do just what he was gonna do and you make it easier. That's the goal.
You make
50%
that where there is no value. for
But
the
that's what
IRS.
he was gonna, no, because you're getting the IRS deduction when you do that.
Because they have value. You could
That's what,
have
we're not taking it away until you do that. That's the same
You have
thing.
to prove your entitlement, right? You have to prove feasibility through like, you have to have no wetlands, you have to be able to prove. that you could do
So this guy in the monastery said he had 100 development rights, and what you're talking about is someone was talking about taking them away somehow. I'm not talking about taking them away now. I'm talking about if you want to do the conservation through this easy way, then you have to donate. You can get your tax write-off and donate.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Actually, the monastery is a really good example. Let's hone in on that a little bit. When Bill purchased the monastery, he spent a lot of time in our office trying to figure out what the development rights were and what his ability would be to develop the property if for some reason this deal were to go south, or if he still, even after doing the conservation easement, still couldn't recoup his retirement money. She said his wife is gonna leave him, can't recoup their retirement money. No, probably tongue in cheek, but still, he did invest a lot of his own money, own funds into it. He said, what if I did 6 or 7 lots out of the whole monastery, instead of the few hundred lots that the monastery could have turned into? I thought that's probably a great idea. And he said, maybe I'll just kind of put them over here in the corner, or maybe I'll put them up next to him over here. Maybe make a way to.
There was a pathway then to do that. It was just a subdivision, it was a cluster, essentially you just retired after the conservation, there was a pathway to get there.
Could he
So
have
the
done
cluster-
that after he put it into an easement, conservation easement?
No,
No, so that was before that.
Right.
So we build a
So-
cluster subdivision, then retire.
Right, so if he were to follow all the rules in the cluster subdivision ordinance, I mean, he'd be putting in roadways, pathways, open spaces. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that the cluster subdivision ordinance has.
because you would have to pave that whole road, I mean, is that road paved?
The long driveway?
Yeah, it can't.
I don't think so. I think it's dirt.
But didn't he do that anyway? Isn't there a piece of the monastery that's still set for development?
Might be. And he may have very well done exactly what we're talking about, so that he could essentially recoup, whatever the IRS wouldn't otherwise.
So if the question is, would the planning commission be willing to look at making an easier way to cluster, which is just another way of putting what you're saying, right? What are the requirements? And I would say, well, it would have to be donated to a conservation easement, which would need to be either like the land trust, I guess something a little bit more grabby than just my personal land trust. And then maybe a donation up to a sizable majority of the property rights, if we're gonna make it easy.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
I would also think that we should consider making it aesthetically open, not,
So spacing the lots out.
well, in some ways, so that it maintains the general plan concept of open space.
Yeah.
Versus
20 acres.
little lots blocking whatever happens to be behind it.
What would you think that means? Minimum lot size an acre?
Well, that's part of it, but I think how it's oriented and how it's configured based on the land as well, so that you're not just looking at
And you
houses tonight that, you know, are gonna be whatever they end up being right on the road, and not landscaped, because there's no water to landscape them, so they're just gonna be raw dirt or ugly rocks or whatever, they're not gonna be green. And then maybe you'll have something behind it you want donated, but you won't see it, or.
So it's just a big backyard for that house, but we don't actually consider it open space.
I got a question on the cluster, more for just to know when it comes to, because obviously TDRs are like, that's part of the general plan, right, it's in there, transferring density, so if we do clusters. So you, again, 90 acres, easy math, because that's 30 things, they only want to do 10, that gives you 20 extra things. Can they just do 10 in a cluster, and cluster the 10 and take the 20? And send them off to they're not in the form base, they're out in. Right, they're by my house, right, which is over in Huntsville.
Using the existing cluster code?
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that what?
Yeah, they could if they wanted to.
Because that's the other thing, is we don't hire, how to support the general plan with TDRs, that's the other part.
Cluster requires more than a. You got 30 acres. And you wanna go into a cluster and have 10 lots. You have to put more than 20 acres into the cluster, into the. It requires more. than-
60% in the AV3 zone, 80% in the other zones.
I just think it could make sense to either retire or move them to a village, because that is the general plan.
So in my 30 acres, I might get 8 lots out of it if I want to cluster, or if I use 3-acre lots, I could get 10. So the cluster makes you pay more, you lose development by clustering,
Yeah. I haven't done a cluster here yet.
Areas by clustering.
because they require more.
They require more.
If they say, if you got 30 acres, I want to cluster it, I want to put all my houses over here. Okay, we'll let you do that. If you got 30 acres. If you go build them on 3-acre lots, you can have 10 lots. 10 houses. If you cluster them, you can only have 8. I'm making up 8, but it's less than 10.
If you have septic in a well, because you have to have a certain acreage lot, so you start losing density at that point.
But if you had 9 acres. And you want to cluster 3.
Yeah, well, you'd have to have an acre and a half each if you're on a septic system and a well. And so right there, what is that, 6? You wouldn't comply with the cluster subdivision code if you did that.
Doesn't support, I love the idea of conserving, but
Cluster rather than Bennett, than giving you a bonus, which is.
yeah, you're losing density, which is against the general.
Sell all your TDRs and nobody can build there anyway.
That's, so I'm saying you're retiring them. off
You
to-
retire them, you sold them, but now it's.
But it's the same, idea. Either you retire them not to be built or you move them over to the village. Either one is great.
And that's what I'm thinking is with this, I understand that you want to create a kind of a PR situation. We're gonna be talking about conserving. We're gonna make a new ordinance for conserving, you know, I got that part, but we just passed a TDR program, which is somewhat controversial in its own right in the valley, but it can be used. People can then create open space by selling off their TDRs. Do we need to create a whole new ordinance?
The question is how many different opportunities do we want to create for what we are trying to get out of this. And so my suggestion is have unlimited opportunities to create open spaces. Don't limit yourself to just TDRs. Don't limit yourself to just one program that may or may not work based off of the evidence that we have already.
I hear you. I'm still stuck on when you introduced the program, the dying wish was the conservation. Great. Call the Ogden Valley Land Trust.
Mhm.
The difference comes in when all of a sudden it's like, but I want to monetize this. Now we're talking about something else.
Yeah, I like the idea more of what the chair said is just have some metric. If it's gonna be easy, have some metric that you gotta transfer or you gotta retire them. I like, I personally like that.
I agree, other than I probably, in this scenario, I wouldn't at this point support the transfer. I would say, if you're gonna, like, if you wanna go through that process of, you know, easily, we wanna make it easy for you, as long as you're also gonna take away, like, what I don't want, let me put it this way, is if you mentioned 30 acres and 3 and 10 units, right? I don't want someone to be able to go, great, we're gonna conserve 20 and I'm gonna be able to do a little more than what I could have done if I clustered, right? It's gonna be easier for me to do it that way. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
I would prefer, it's like, okay, but you can only do 5 homes on 30 acres,
I like
or
it.
you can only do 4 homes.
You're
And
getting
if you're gonna
incentive
do
to
this
retire.
Easier way,
I like it.
you have to retire part of it,
Right.
and then it's like, okay, it's not monetary, doesn't make sense for me as a developer to do that. Right, but I could take advantage of tax advantages of donating, and that's what we want, that's what I would think we would want.
You're creating an incentive to retire.
And I don't
right? You get
oppose
an
any of
easy
that,
route.
but the current cluster doesn't allow for TDRs to move, right? It takes too much. So whether it's in that one or a different one, I think there needs to be some opportunity for someone. So again, you're taking a lot of that sprawl. Remember you kept saying measles, by the way, I got a lot of feedback that they hated the word measles. We need to find it.
You're supposed to hate measles.
I think, yeah, I thought that was the
Well,
point.
you could turn it around and say daisies,
Daisy,
beautiful flower, and that spread out homes done right are better than clusters where you have congestion and no parking and
The point is,
trash and all
Let's
that.
just go, I hear that argument. Here's the open space argument of. If you cluster, you can allow for more fields similar to Bailey, right? So if you do that, how do you not penalize somebody for? For that, that's just my thought, and again, what's in the general plan. No, but I'm all for what you said.
in this scenario, if you're selling them, there's no, it's kind of like we're competing with the IRS.
Sure.
Thing, and I don't know.
Some people may use the IRS as an option, others may use the TDR as an option to make money back.
You're
I don't
not
know.
competing with the IRS. When you sell your development, right, you're paying taxes.
Yeah, that's ordinary income.
Well, I'm talking about, so if I'm looking to do this, I'm going, well, I saved this 30% or whatever of every dollar that I would donate versus selling, and I think that, so having the right to sell it is still, I think, a problem, right? So let's say I've got a massive development over here, well, I've got, 30 acres over here, well, gosh, I'm gonna look good by making a conservation easement, but I'm gonna sell all the development rights over here.
Right.
Build this massive thing that maybe nobody really wants, but I'm gonna do it. And then I'm gonna do this super easy, right? So I don't think that means it either, right? I mean, we already have said that we only want sending, so I guess they could do that anyway. I just don't want to make an easier way for them to do that based on what we've already got it.
Yeah, the TDR program right now makes it very easy to do, assuming it actually takes
You
off.
just can't, that's getting clustering, take more away.
Right, so if you're doing the TDR,
It wouldn't make sense to cluster.
No.
It just, I don't know, it just doesn't, something about me just doesn't make sense.
Now, if, you got 30 acres and somebody comes in and says, okay, if I could do 10 homes out of this, I want to sell 5 of them and I want to cluster 5 of them. They could still go through the cluster subdivision code to do that. They'd have to follow all of the standards.
Okay, so they could retire the 5 first and then go cluster.
They could,
My point is what we're doing is we're making bigger lots. We're by forcing someone to do that, you're gonna create a bigger lot.
Seems to me that this person or this woman who wants to see her land, has lots of choices right now. Way, more than one for sure.
Mhm.
And way more than one to sell and monetize it as well. And it seems to me that around the valley where there's approved developments, they're not going gangbusters to build right now. I mean, there's a giant development, there's no activity even in right now. And we recently approved the new phase and there's no activity at all. So to me, it just doesn't seem necessary to create another path. For the same, for what already exists in many different ways.
Yeah, so the case we're talking about, well, there are 2 or 3 cases, real cases that I'm thinking of that this could help with. And what we currently have on the books would not help any of them. So
But they still can sell.
they could
Still
sell.
could donate. And I just don't know that it fits with the general plan to give everybody the upper hand in development. The general plan doesn't say we should try to develop and help every development opportunity to fruition. It doesn't say that. But everybody has the right to sell or to sell their development rights or to donate. They all have the right to do that. And if you want to sell or build, there's a couple different ways you can do it.
What if we start smaller, much smaller? What if we say you could do this conservation thing very easy, as long as you're not creating any more dwelling units than already exists? What if we just start there?
I wouldn't support that,
Why not?
because that'd only be in support of it if you're retiring.
That's right, so the conservation easement would have to be applied to the rest of the property.
It's like,
So you don't get any more development rights out of it. You have what's
no,
built.
not you, you have what's built, that's the only thing I can support. Because it's like, okay, you have one home on 30 acres, that's what you get.
Okay, that's.
But I'm
that's
not
what I'm
saying, what it should be, I'm just saying, I'm
Isn't
not,
that where we
I'm not
started?
I was saying,
inclined to
how is
make
it
a
different
back.
than when we started?
Easier way to make this happen.
Where you said that would take
Just
the
keep
single
that house.
house down to an acre and the rest could be donated.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's.
where we
sounds-
were.
That's where we were.
I'm so confused because I thought.
But
so what are you
Because they
saying?
developed the
So it's not like- that's where we were.
So we are, that is where we started, and what I heard was, now we're not interested in doing that. Did I not hear
No,
that?
But
not
what you
interested in
just said-
pulling density off and then selling and creating a little home on the strip. If they wanna retire all the rights of their land, go for it.
So that's why I went back to what we first
But the,
started
the
talking about.
original is not, they don't have any more than one, they can't really do anything. They can do one, they can, with 5?
No.
No,
they can't do
in this
one.
particular case, they wouldn't be able to do it.
Wait, they don't even have development rights?
No, they have one home.
They
that's
installed
built.
it. development rights.
But this, but what he's talking about more than just one, he's thinking.
More than this person?
Yeah, he's like,
Okay.
this might have sprung the idea, but the idea is like, let's create a backdoor way to make this easier, to
Okay.
incentivize conservation. Right? That's what you're trying to get at. And again, I'm okay with that, but I think, okay, if we're gonna create some kind of fast channel for this, it should come with some
Put some skin in the game.
skin in the
Oh,
game
for
of
sure.
IRS donations or whatever. And I'm not convinced it should be to make them sell it, because we kind of already have a whole code for that. Why would we do another way to make it either? To me, it might be make it easier for someone, and I'm not sure I really want to do it because maybe I don't know what I'm agreeing to.
Fair enough.
I got an information. I don't think that we are giving anybody anything. We don't have stuff to give people. People have their property rights. We're not here to give them stuff. We're not dictators. We're not kings. We're here, our purpose is to help people enjoy the rights that they have. And if the rules and regulations we have in place make it tougher for that to happen, then we ought to fix them so people can enjoy the rights they have on their property. Okay, if we back out and say, okay, when we have these discussions and we all agree that the outcome is density neutral. We're not creating more density, but by the same token, we're not taking away density. We're trying to help people enjoy the rights they have. And if they configure things differently than we have thought of so far, we're not giving them anything. Well, it's a good idea. Let's support that. I think there is a potential concern in the future, when things are down, so like with this 5-acre parcel we're talking about. When things are, up zoned, in the future, if this goes into a conservation easement, if it goes into the farm, agriculture, whatever, and
It could be in ours, not if they split the acres off, because we had that discussion, that works for me.
it could be perpetually farmland. Okay, If we say, no, you can't do it, you're stuck, well, so it's not gonna be farmland forever, it's gonna be infill. But if we create a method by which this house could be on a legal 1 acre lot and the rest is perpetually farmland. Isn't that what the general plan is looking for?
Yeah, but I would say without splitting lots off and selling them. So sure, if they want to donate everything except the 1 acre, that seems like it's conformance with the general plan.
My concern is not on the one, because I totally agree with what you said, totally. My concern is we create a back door that says, oh, I have 20 acres here and another development here. I can, and they made an easy way for me to do this that is like not, so basically they just go into Rick and get it done, doesn't have to be public hearing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what I'm afraid of. It's like, wait a minute, we're not doing this. How it should be done.
As soon as you do something with inverse incentives, it's not gonna happen. If we have a cluster ordinance that says, yeah, we really like the idea of clustering and less infrastructure. Ooh, less infrastructure, let's punish the developer because he doesn't have to pay for more roads. Let's take some more away from him somewhere else. Well, we're not gonna have a lot of clustering. Okay,
Mhm.
so what good did that do? If we keep things density neutral. Okay, well, density neutral,
Density neutral as of when?
as of,
As of 5 acres, as
as
of
of
3
when
acres?
this 3 acre zoning came in, yes.
Yeah, 3 acres.
So that's the thing, why don't we make it density neutral as a 5?
No, but
What's
it's
the
just,
counter argument?
it's just what it is right now.
Right, but that
Then
can
we
change
should-
too.
and
We can
then we
change
shouldn't
that
worry about the
anytime.
upzoning, 'cause then
We're
it's density neutral.
arbitrarily setting a date, that's my point. Like, so talking about being density neutral is all subject based on just random timing. It could be based on 5 acre, it
No,
could be
it's,
based on
it's
1,
subject
it
to
just happens to be today.
today's timing.
But today's timings allows for 30,000 people,
Okay,
well, 30,000 development. Well,
okay,
what if, you know, it should, I think it should be subject to 15, right? Like,
Okay.
there's no, like, that's my point, is there's no real, like, we're just arbitrarily saying that, you know what I mean?
no, we're not,
We absolutely are,
not
because we came in and took it away and no one had any problems with it.
This
Right,
is
the
the
one,
one,
the 1 acre.
the whole 3 acre zoning is arbitrary.
Yeah,
The 1 acre zoning was arbitrary. When they adopted back in 80 something, it was all arbitrary. So we just said, yeah, let's have 1 acre lots. And then they, well, let's have 5 acre lots, and they couldn't make that fly, so, okay, we'll compromise and have 3 acre lots. It's all arbitrary. And in the future, if there's more pressure, it's gonna be upzoned, because we're gonna have more places for people. This is an opportunity, I think, if I understand you right, Charlie, that you're looking for a method by which somebody can say, okay, I want this to be perpetually a farm. Or a something, concept, something.
Mhm.
And it can't be changed. Zoning can change all over the place, but it's gonna stay the same.
That's the intention, yes.
And if you create this pathway, like that word, then somebody that wants to potentially have a farm can do that.
We don't know that it is a farm or ever will be a farm. Again, if it's 8 acres or 20 acres of unirrigated land with no water rights, it's not going to be a productive farm, I don't think.
Yeah, I
Be
think
open
it's a farm,
space
yeah.
though, but.
It's open space, which is
Grandfather rule that just say if you were on there before the day became 3 acre rule. Your grandfathered into the 1 acre rule anyway, and you can. give
Then you
away
can
the
subdivide it
rest.
up. Would you write that?
You can give the rest away and do whatever you want.
If it hasn't traded to title, the title hasn't.
Well, just the whole house being built and.
Is that as long as there's a home on it?
And then you can give the rest away, and that was already grandfathered into the 1 acre, because somebody built there.
That's essentially the ordinance that I'm suggesting, that we start with. I'm thinking of another gentleman who, he's got 40 acres and wants to, make, 4 lots, for his kids. And it would sure make a lot more sense for him to be able to do 1 acre lots in exchange for the rest of it going into a conservation easement. Than it would be for him to do 4 3 acre lots spread them out.
well, so I guess in general, my point, what I like the idea of making it easier. But only if it's like, okay, 40 acres or 30 acres for ease of simplicity. you could do 10 now or 9, I guess, based on cluster. But if you, well, just assuming, right? So in a cluster, I could do 9. And I have to go through the regulations of roads and it has to look so nice and it has to do whatever, which is what we've all agreed upon, right? It's not that it's a bad thing, it's just that we've said, okay, if you want a cluster, this is kind of how it should look, right? So that we don't get cluster problems. And so if we're gonna avoid that, right? There should be, it's like, okay, so now you don't have to go through the expense of meeting with the county and putting in roads and doing that. You can only build 4. You only have 4, you can donate those, you can take care of the IRS, you can use the IRS deduction. And you can save the money from the development, because you don't have as many requirements to do this. But and so, yeah, I would support that, but it needs to have I'll call it an incentive to retire.
And that's what the general plan says. In fact, the general plan talks about creating a conservation. That does exactly this. I can't remember what the number was. I think it was 50%, like. You can do up to 50% of whatever the 3-acre zone would have allowed you to do. Put them into smaller pieces and put the rest into open space. And the only reason we haven't done anything until now is because we did have the cluster code to enable that to happen. However, only certain size properties, with a certain amount of lots can be used, or the cluster code can be only used for a certain amount of lots that could be gained from it. And so it wouldn't be applicable in all circumstances where I'm thinking, this person who one house on 5 acres, and let's say it's 4 houses, and each of them are on a 3-acre lot. And they say, boy, we got all that behind us that we would like to put in a conservation easement, but in order for it to qualify for conservation, they need a little bit more, so it's gonna eat into our back. So how about our 4 lots? Let's have them be 1 acre, no more homes. Just 1 acre, the rest of it going to conservation, or we could do up to 50% of whatever we otherwise could have done out there. Right here, up next to where our other homes are. And we could put a lower limit on what the lot size requirement should be, or could be.
Why don't you just drop something and bring it to us in a work session?
I think it's great.
If we could see it, I think I could.
That
Personally,
sounds better when you say it.
yeah, I think I could understand it if it was drafted.
So you're punishing the guy for wanting to put it in a conservation easement.
No, really, you're giving him the 1 acre he wanted.
That becomes administrative, right? You're talking administrative because.
Yeah, but he's already got 3 acres.
Or just.
It's just less standard than what's in the rest of the
I'm
subdivision.
saying, is this
3 acre.
go to Rick?
You could go to planning commission.
But it's under certain numbers,
He's already
it's
got
like,
5 homes there.
If it's under 10, it'd be small.
Okay, if
keep
you
with
want
what's
to
already
take
there.
your 3-acre lot.
You're gonna know whether it fits or not, why come to us?
Yeah.
This creates another level.
Yeah, I just don't think we can.
You can just adjust the lots.
Penalize you somehow. I mean, we already get 5,
No,
so 5 homes on there. If you're revenue neutral, you keep 5 homes and that's what you got. You got 5 homes, they just happen to be on 1 acre instead of 3 acres. And the rest can't be developed.
But I would support that.
So
I would
that's,
support the idea of
that's the
not
revenue,
punishing.
or the density neutral I'm talking about.
That I could
He didn't
support.
get any more, he didn't get any.
I don't
more.
want to support, I don't want to create, like I mentioned, I don't want to create a way for me to somehow skirt the rules of a cluster subdivision,
So, but what I heard is you would support what Jeff just said.
which is, okay, I've got 5 homes built or 5 rights established. I
Already.
want to donate half of it to a conservation easement. Yeah.
Have the property
So
or
I've
have the
got
rights?
3, or let's just say I've got 3 lots of 3 acres. They built the homes where, wherever they built them,
Mhm.
and say there's 50 feet in each backyard that they want to just combine and give.
Okay, I think you guys
I'm
are
supporting
talking 2
that.
different things. What I heard,
You just shrink your lot size around your house.
I think it all goes back to what you just said about this lady, that they're allowed, what they're saying is they'd be open to this 1 acre and retiring out,
I
right?
think the differentiation is already existing homes versus
Yeah.
new homes. That's a differentiation. And I think it makes, it's easier to swallow with existing homes.
Yeah.
Tweaking things around
Existing,
to allow a donation versus sidestepping existing situations to allow someone to make some donation and some sales and stuff, so I think it's a big difference.
I'll craft it in a way where you guys can expand it at some point in the future if you want to. But, so I'll just have it crafted where it's just limited to what exists now. And then if you wanted to debate a little bit more over time, to go, well, maybe we can let them get up to X amount, 50% or 20% of what they could have otherwise, we could adjust that. And this is really good feedback. This helps me kind of shape the ordinance in my head.
Let me clarify. So situation one is the guy's got 30 acres, he's got 10 development rights,
And no homes.
no homes. Okay. He wants to, okay. He can sell those development rights. 10 of them, and they can be moved somewhere else,
Mhm.
potentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Already part of it.
Okay, or. And here's what I'm trying to understand, he could say, well, let me have 1 acre lots instead of 3 acre lots, I'll put the whole rest in. Conservation, in the Farm Bureau. Okay. And so now I have 10 homes on there, but the rest is gone forever. Into farm. And then you're suggesting, no. You can only, you can't have 10 homes if you're gonna do that, only let you have 5. So you can have 5 homes and you donate your 10 develop, your
You're the five.
5 development rights to, they disappear, they evaporate. If you're gonna put this in the Farm Bureau.
If you use this path that we've been talking about.
That's with the 50%, you know, allowing to keep up to 50% of the density that you currently have. I'm gonna write it, just for the sake of conversation, I'm gonna write it in a way where you're not keeping 50%, you're just keeping what homes exist. But I'll write it in such a way that we can say, you're keeping 50. We can sketch that in, as in our next conversation.
You could also draw your lot lines, have them, so now you got a bunch of 3 acre lots and say, I'm gonna build my house, but I wanna give the other 2 acres away.
That's right.
And so now you just have 1 acre lots, but they were 3. And that's,
So aren't we down to 2 hypothetical? One is, you can have, I wanna have 1 acre lots, donate the rest. Okay, you got 10 in 1 acre lots. And the rest is in the forever farm. Or if you penalize him, you get 5 1 acre lots and the rest is in a farm. Is that where we are? We got some wisdom kind of.
Well, I'm listening to discussion and, first of all, you're assuming that some group will want this property and will be willing to buy that, you know, to accept that. Tell you right now that there is very little money available and like. Major conservancy and all those, they don't have money, they're not, they want to do more easements, but they just don't have the funding to purchase those easements and it takes. What we're seeing, if you go to NRCS, you know, to get that 50% easement money, and then you go out and find somebody else, plus the landowner gives up a certain amount of that value so they can get the easement, that can take 3 years if you're really lucky, but usually it takes 6 to years or even longer. We've seen some stay 10 years. So I would suggest that you, before you take the time to write what the ordinance is, to do a little more discussion, say with the department and some of these other agencies that can hold easements and understand what those requirements are before you take the time to do this, because I support, you know, trying to protect and keeping open space and keeping it in ag or whatever other purpose that, you know, depending on who holds that easement wants to do. But right now, I think the idea is good, but I think we need to do a little more homework before you take the time to start writing the ordinance. That would be my suggestion. You know, we're running, there's a problem, and I've seen it, you know, out here. you're losing farm ground for businesses and everything else pretty quick.
Mhm.
And you'd like to save that. If you have your scenario, if you've got this lady with 5 acres, who's gonna buy that easement and what are they gonna do with that easement and how they gonna manage it? Because can't, I mean, 5 acres, you can't farm 5 acres and make money. Unless you've got a lot more. And so, depending on the comments that is made, you don't want a weed patch, you don't want a fire hazard, you don't want anything like that, you want it to be usable for an easement, so it works.
That's good feedback. We've got a land trust in the Ogden Valley that I've been working with, to do something like this. And so we're in discussions now, but I don't want to limit it to just the Ogden Valley Land Trust. Opportunities to.
Well, I don't think you should, I mean, I think if you're gonna go this route, you really need to look at it and make sure that you're meeting and understand the requirements that are out there, because you don't want to tell somebody they can do this when they go try to do it, and they can't do it. I mean, you talk about your cluster ordinance and how hard that is. I think you're gonna find out that each one aspect takes just as long, and just as hard coming up with those dollars to buy back the development rights.
Can I ask a question? What's the difference between putting something in a conservation easement and when we, so say somebody sells off a TDR and that land now does not have any more development rights on it? What is the difference between those two?
Right now, the county has an ordinance that says you can't do anything with that. The
Which
county
one?
can, with the property that you sold the rights from.
Okay, nobody can do
You still
anything.
maintain it, you farm it.
So
just
I
as if
still
it's
own
yours.
it
You still own it, you just can't.
and I maintain it and I pay taxes on it,
But the only
but I
thing-
can't build on it. And if it's in a conservation easement, then what?
Okay, so the difference is the county has control over whether or not you build, and this conservation easement is a third party that has control on whether or not you build. This is,
The county could change their ordinances later and they could develop that ground.
Even though you sold the development right, there's no development right on it, because we
I-
discussed this with the
I
TDRs.
I
and
gotta do
asked
is ups
about
on it.
Yeah, like I told you, it's fluid.
I know, but we
why
discussed
we
this and
say,
I
"Oh,
said,
we'll
are
do
you
it
keeping
now."
track of
We
how many
can't now.
TDRs and when they're squashed that nobody can do anything with
So
it?
that's why I say.
Until they say, "Here, have some more."
It'd be higher.
How they say here, have some
We
more.
were talking about population collapse, you know, and I went to a seminar with the Utah economist. And he said that Utah is below replacement rate, even Utah. So, you know, the concept of always having to go up and more is an old concept in reality.
Yeah.
Maybe in Ogden Valley, it's gonna continue to grow, but because there's less people coming up.
It's gonna slow down.
Everybody else.
I was shocked the other day, I haven't been in the bridges in a long time. No construction in there right now that I saw. Last year it was going crazy,
Mhm.
9 months ago. 4, really, I didn't see that.
Under 16.
But there's no holes in the ground that I saw. There's 4 holes in the ground there?
Yeah.
They just got 2 more plants.
I say, but there's no construction, but there's lots of development, like,
You gotta remember the water rights. were-
yeah, planned
That's why
and
nothing
roads,
happened,
like, I
so
mean. code
water got
members
turned back
felt
on.
they
It's just an economic goal.
Yes, right.
If you get interest rates back down to 3%, which, I mean, that's a far cry, because that was the best end that we've had, right? But if you ever get them down in that area, it's gonna go fast again.
Yeah.
We've got a housing shortage on the Wasatch Front, even though we are growing slower, we're still, I wanna say the last numbers were like 20 or 25% below the number of homes that we need. And so it's just. gonna continue
That's
to go.
subject to inflows though.
It-
Migration.
Net
Migration.
migration.
It's both.
That can very much change. So this guy was saying that basically the jobs market is drastically changing in Utah. That's what this is about. And that, you know, what we're used to is people wanting to stay. Well, Utah having that higher replacement rate happens to have more people than the rest of the country. And so, because the rest of the country is much lower even than Utah, like, for example, it was like Utah was like 1.8 or 1.9, and the rest of the country is like 1.4.
The replacement rate is 1.9. So say-
Something like that. And so he's saying that basically there's jobs that pay higher everywhere else.
Mhm.
And so people are gonna find that they're gonna move. because it's worth it. And he says that's what's happening. And he's bringing an economic case for that. So I guess Utah is great and all, but I don't know how that's gonna last. If the things, in general population where you've got, cities calling for major influx and they're gonna pay you more and you can afford a nicer home in another city that has, I can buy a home and, a beautiful home for 300 grand somewhere else, it's 500 here, why? And I
To
can
go-
make more there.
to go
That's kinda
live
what
in.
I'm saying.
But like our valley is, empty. It's a lot of second homes and vacation. I mean, people with cash bought and they don't need to live there. They still live wherever they go and.
That's an interesting point. Should we encourage second homes?
No, I'm just saying that I don't know that that necessarily translates to the valley. The valley is a lot of,
There's
people
a,
have the money to buy and they just leave it empty.
there's a documentary called Nobody's Home. And it's about the second home phenomenon and what happens in communities, how communities fall apart when you don't have anybody there living.
I think the perfect example is Wolf Creek. I mean, I'm nothing against it, but the businesses don't thrive there. They don't, right? And why is that? You supposedly have all these people, it's the highest density in the whole valley, but yet you can't seem to keep businesses there that thrive. And they struggle. So, maybe it's not the right way, just a thought.
It doesn't build community, I can tell you that.
It's a good thought.
To tie us back together, Commissioner Wiltner,
Hmm.
that's what Charlie and I were talking about, the infill in the future.
I'm sorry, the,
The infill, when we were talking about the infill,
The Epsons.
it's when the county now has 3 acre zoning. Then they make it 1/2 acre zoning in the future that allows.
just to
people
accommodate more.
To go into this 5 acres and build 10 homes.
That would have to be after there's a major infrastructure creation. in the valley.
Sure, I mean, we're
And
talking
that's a long time and a lot.
75 years down the road or whatnot, right? I mean,
And so the difference is, if it's just subject to the county zoning, it can change up or down. And does change up or down. If it's owned in some kind of a land trust or something,
then
it won't be.
it doesn't change.
affected.
So,
It's
so
owned by somebody else.
right, so for example, when we did Nordic, and they had they changed the section to open zone, right, O1 or whatever it was, right? And, there was that discussion and the public came and they were saying like, oh, but we're gonna create all this, and this is dedicated open, it was, somebody kind of whispered until it rezones, right? And so basically, everything is zoned the way it is until we rezone it.
And what?
But if it's in a conservation,
That's right.
it's locked, but the conservation could take 6-8 years.
So what he's talking
There's-
about
there's
specifically
more.
is purchasing conservation.
But there's more.
What we're talking about is donating conservation easements. So as long as the issue of revenue is not there, it can go a little faster.
Okay,
If we get the IRS involved, I mean, talk to Bill White, it took him 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
If we get to that point, but we're just talking about going to Trevor, saying, Trevor, you've got a lot of acreage. We would like to see you get maybe 2 or 3 homes out of that, and then the rest of it go to conservation. To the land trust, and the land trust is willing to buy off all that, allow you to donate that to them. That can happen within a few months. It's just, if Trevor's not willing to part with it unless there's money involved, then it's challenging. Yeah, it takes long.
Let me run some numbers in my 2 hypotheticals. Hypothetical 1, you get. What I come up with 30 acres. And you say, okay, I want 10 1-acre lots. I'm putting the rest in conservation, land trust, something. Okay. I don't know that there is gonna be a big value in what goes into the land trust. He's donating it. I don't know if there'll be much write-off because you can't build on it. So now, the second hypothetical, you only get 5. So you gave up 5. Now that increased the value that you're donating. I guess you get some kind of a write-off for that.
IRS.
Yeah.
But you might as well get rid of the cluster subdivision ordinance if you do this. Because they can bring them all down, all 10 of them, right next to the road and cluster them. And
You just have to have more acreage.
Well, yeah, but why would you do that when you can do this and just put them all right down here and keep all 10?
If I understand the cluster in West Weaver, there were bonuses in their cluster ordinance, 25% or some big bonuses.
Yeah, up to 50%.
Yeah, because you have to have as much infrastructure going in.
We don't have any in the Ogden Valley. bonuses.
I thought you had infrastructure, I'm like, you're right.
Yes,
yeah.
both of those.
But in the valley, there is no bonus. If you cluster, there's a negative bonus. You lose. So you say. the
You also
cluster in
say,
the west is
to
not
be
being
fair,
used, even though they have bonuses.
They want to see it being done a different way. They're basically upselling across the board out west.
I think that's, you know, so if I do 30 acres, that same scenario, and I get 9 instead of 10, which is roughly what it is, right? I mean,
Well, you're
in
an
a
acre,
cluster.
what, you're one and a half times what you need? Is that what you said, cluster? I read the code.
In terms of how much density you're getting?
Yeah, so like, if
How
I
much
have
is
30
required?
and I want a cluster, I can do 9
9.
instead of 10.
Yeah.
right?
So you
Okay.
lose
But you also save a whole bunch of money because I don't have to do it on 3 acres. So it's kind of a give and take.
And then the county benefits because they have less roads to maintain, because you have to build less.
And so does each.
Focus is on
individual.
punishing the developer. Well, he's gonna save some money, we gotta make him pay some money. The true
What I
idea of
think-
clustering is you get a better product.
This wipes the cluster subdivision down if you don't do a 1 for, if you're just doing 1 acre lots, you can do 10 of them here and give the rest to come.
I mean, there are many people doing clustering in the valley.
No.
Didn't
I don't think
Nordic
we've
does,
seen
right?
one in a long time.
Nordic-
Nordic did TDR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's-
Didn't they were doing a cluster with there was like a little side pocket of single family homes that was a cluster?
yeah.
That was a thought, that wasn't approved.
Oh, it didn't, I thought it was
That's why I
there,
say
it didn't
you
go
have to
through.
have some kind of- So the other thing
Is you make things more successful if you're gonna have this arbitrary zoning limit, 3 or 1 or whatever. You impede success if you say we're gonna make it like their current cluster thing up there, you're gonna lose if you cluster.
Does clustering give more onus upon the developer and the community to maintain the open space better?
Clustering so the open space can be owned by the HOA or it could be privately owned.
Right.
If it's privately owned, you go after the private individual if they're not maintaining it. But as far as, like, if it's privately owned, it could be held in however way they want to. They want to put horses on it, they want to put.
But they have
Leave it fallow.
they have to keep it clear of invasive weeds and stuff.
Why don't we
Yeah.
fix the clustering one? Like,
You don't want clustering. I finally, this is Patrick. Sorry, I had to work today. But we don't want clustering in the valley. I don't know how, is this the vote to turn farmland into clustering?
Sorry?
So, I get the point. I don't know that I mean, so we're talking about like 250,000 cost savings. I don't know. I don't know. We can talk about the clustering thing. As far as that goes, I think we would support if you have 3 acres and you want to donate half of an acre each to combine and give it to the land trust. I think that's a great idea and we should do it to make it easier. As far as, you know, new subdivisions go and how this goes about, I think we gotta tread lightly because, and quite honestly, maybe not, because I would never do it and no one else is gonna ever do it. Because if I had 30 acres and I'm gonna donate it, I'm just gonna sell those TDR rights to whoever can buy them now, right? And store them, and then I'm gonna donate it. And if I'll make way more money anyway, so it's kind of a moot point to even have a subdivision way, because it's like, well, if you want to do it, sell the rights and then donate it, and it's the same thing. And that's how I would do it, and I'm sure everybody else would. The only person that would benefit from this is someone who is dead set on doing a conservation easement, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, and he doesn't care that it donates it, and in that person's case, I think, yeah, we probably should make like an exception for that guy, but
What if
those are
every,
one-offs.
yeah, what if every case is treated as an exception? If it doesn't fit within one of the
It's just
existing.
a development agreement, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we just went full circle, but back to
Yeah.
development agreement.
Because
Yeah.
it matters, I think, you know, how you're gonna set it up, if it's being farmed, do they have water rights? There's all sorts of variables that no two are gonna be identical.
Yeah, the challenge with it, if we can find a way to help them be similar and write an ordinance, you're gonna have a lot less administration, a lot less cost, a lot less staff. The more development agreements we do, the more unique rules there are, the more staff you're gonna have to hire to keep track of things. And so there's another cost that's associated with it. And we know we're limited by budget. And so the easier we can make things, the better in many cases.
You're not gonna have hundreds.
That's what I'm
You
saying.
might have a small handful over a
Yeah.
few number of years, I guess.
Yeah, I think, right now I could think of 3 people who may take advantage of it and we could help them out through development agreement. And so maybe we do nothing. I'm still gonna work on it because I think it'll help people out west. And so whether or not we use it in the valley, is a different story.
There's people that want to donate lots to conservation.
There are, yep, there are, they've got TDRs in their general plan as well. And they've got TDRs in their form base, as well, so. They're looking at trying to preserve existing open farmlands in huge chunks. Not these 5, 10, 20 acre pieces that are gonna have houses all surrounding it, but bigger
So
contiguous.
walk me through that. What's the difference? Why do we need something if they're already gonna sell the development right in the TDR?
They might not,
I mean,
But why not?
that's my, I guess that's part of it, is
because
like,
they might wanna farm.
Why don't we just transfer? the
we
TDRs?
clearly have a scenario that we need to have, or that might be a good idea to have something.
Mhm.
And that's, if you got 3 acres and you want 1 acre each, of you got 3 of your neighbors get together and you all wanna donate that and get it out of the control of the county, I think we should, that's part of the general plan,
Yep.
right?
I get
That's
it.
what it should be.
Yep.
Now, but then we've got the other scenario of, well, TDRs, I've got 30 acres, I'm gonna sell those 10 off and I wanna make sure it stays a conservation area. Why do we need something to do that? Don't we already have, like, can't you just do that?
You can, but the county holds full control over whether or not that,
Even if give.
Even if you
because I've got
donate
that
it after
30
he
acres
sells
that
the
has no
TDRs.
development rights,
That's what he
and I
said.
just give the 30 acres.
then no, in that case, if you've got a third party that's holding it. then-
Right,
Isn't
and
that the same thing?
or
We're-
the smartest path, because you make a little bit of money and you get your conservation, like that
It's
seems
the
to
only
be.
way that it be done.
That's right.
Except for those people that don't wanna see growth in the valley, so they just retire,
And that's great.
and they can do that. And maybe there should just be a holding pot that, where they hold the TDRs, maybe.
The
The
conservation.
conservation.
The conservation, it takes the TDR, or.
Yeah,
Conservation-
there's no hold, it's the lead.
Yeah.
Conservation easements are just hard, they're not easy, we've looked at, we even looked at it on that Whisper property, it is. Like here in- So that's the only thing,
That should be more than enough information and
Yeah.
fairly clear. That
I'm good with whether.
we just don't want a backdoor channel that can be abused.
Yeah.
That should be
To
clear.
get around the,
To get around the clusters and the, because we spend all the time on clusters and we have rules and regulations there for a reason. I don't think there should be a way around it.
Okay, I'll come back with something. I think we'll probably just limit it to existing homes so that people can divide off for existing homes. So that we're not dealing with one-offs, development agreements. And then if we want to build on that later, we can. If not, it's an option that's in the code. And if you guys don't want to use it at all, great. Use it unless you- Cool.
Can I ask a separate related question though? What is our allowance on the commission during a meeting, a public meeting, especially when we have an audience, to remind people that land trusts and conservation, that this is all an option they have? So in other words, when they come and they say, you know, you're just making it easy for development, you're trying to ruin the valley and, you know, all this other stuff. At what point, I mean, are we allowed to remind people
Yes.
that all we're doing is allowing people the property rights they already have?
Yes.
And everyone also has the right to not develop their development right, to donate it, would that be, I don't know, bad form of us while we're up on the dais, or can we do that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, it was what you said in our last meeting that got me thinking about this other thing, like, well, yeah, they can donate it. Maybe we should make it a little easier for them to do that if they've got existing.
And I like that, but I think it's worth, and I'm happy to take it on, but I think whenever we have the audience get all feisty about how we're trying to ruin the valley, to remind people, everybody has a right, and it includes your right to donate your development right.
Feel free. And that is I wanted to say that, I just didn't want to be antagonistic, because.
Well, that's why my question was, as long as that, that doesn't have me stepping out and becoming, antagonistic, but
No, that's
Okay.
fine. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, that's
Okay.
perfectly legal.
Does the county have any idea how many acres of producing farmland versus idle farmland are in, I'll do that?
I could ask the assessor's office if
They know that?
are keeping track of that. Yeah, well, through the Farmland Act, they've got to know what's happening on the property. Now, as far as production goes, I'm not
I
entirely
know I
certain
have to
there.
show an income on mine
Yeah.
to call it in the green, but that means it's productive.
Yeah, I have the same
That's
small
not
thing, but
Find out who's getting.
I'm just wondering if there's an active understanding of, year to year, how much is producing versus
They
idle.
don't do just a
If they
flat
ask.
discount.
It can't, so I can pull for you how many, you want acres or parcels? I can both, we can get both. Because if it's currently in the Greenbelt Act, it either is producing or the assessor's office hasn't caught it.
Sure.
Yeah. So I can pull that for you.
what's idle? Because if they just cut it and sell that hay to their neighbor, that's still
That's idle.
producing. That's idle? That's not a production?
That's
all I do.
I mean, just.
Right, but that's a producing farm.
Yes,
Okay, so what's idle then? Just letting
just
it rot?
letting it go.
Oh.
And there's plenty of that.
You
I
can do
see.
CPCRP too, where you're supposed to let it go.
Yeah, but I just noticed that there are a lot, especially this year where everything's right now being cut,
Mhm.
there's a lot not. And it's just,
Okay.
full of weeds, and I'm just
Yes.
curious.
Yeah.
Split, and if that's kind of known over time with the cost to farm hay, which isn't a valuable crop. Costs have gone up, the value hasn't so much. What trend are we seeing, which will ultimately drive people to either sell their land or donate it or some hybrid situation?
That's right. Yeah, I can get you those numbers.
It's just interesting to know.
Understanding the landowner's motivation in terms of sell or not sell, gotta know what at least their 5-year return on investment is.
Right.
So that's important. Okay, good.
Oh, just real quick question. Did you say Western Weaver is kind of abandoning their cluster ordinance
Yep,
and moving to what?
they're upzoning.
Upzoning everybody? Okay.
Pretty much, I mean, the plan calls for upzoning everywhere.
you mean reason.
Rezoning to a more dense zone. Yep.
Increase the density.
you're just rezoning.
Which is.
Yeah, but in order to get a rezone, they want meaningful park acreage. They want street trees. They want street connectivity, good, more than what our code calls for, good street connectivity, and good pathway connectivity in order to get that.
That's just different there versus there, two different,
Very
just different.
Quite different in that respect.
All right, let's move on.
Ready to move to talk about agritourism?
I gotta recuse myself. This is your submission.
Oh, no, I get it. I just. You have to.
No, this is you.
I guess your.
Yeah.
I remember.
I didn't have to
asking you to ask me.
I thought for sure.
Sorry.
You sure that's extra?
Yes, you just have to say, I think that's the new rule, you just have to declare.
All right, this is declared. I'm not even getting.
I
paid
do
for it.
declare. Okay, I have 3
This is
copies.
pro bono.
I have 3 black line copies of the ordinance that you're looking at here. If you want to make any comparison, I didn't print one for everyone, so maybe I just kind of spread them out, flip them through or whatever, but the version that you have in front of you is the red line copy. If you want to see how it reads in black line as we're going through this, because red line can be a little hard to track. Feel free to flip over to black one.
Yeah.
Where's the black one? Mine's red.
Thought I had it. No.
Do you have it online? Pull it up on a
Um,
computer or put it on the screen?
I read red line.
Okay. Okay, so the very front sheet of your red line packet, I've just got the email that I sent out to you guys. Again, got out of town all last week, so it didn't get in the packet, but I wanted to make sure this got in your hands before I left town. So in the email, it's just a very brief write-up of what I otherwise would have told you in a memo. What we were talking about from a planning commission perspective is maybe allowing agritourism in the shoreline zone would be appropriate as long as agritourism doesn't have loopholes that you drive trucks through, is what I understood. And so the objective in what you're looking at here in the rewrite is to close some of those loopholes. As I got deep involved in this ordinance, I realized there's a lot to be needed.
Closed, not to be closed.
Yeah, well, it's more than just loopholes. There's just vague language. There's some language in here that it would be very appropriate in a general plan, just general guidance. Aspirational statements. We don't want aspirational statements in our ordinances. We want cut and dry, black and white, as objective as possible. And so as we're going through this, that was my primary, I had my primary target was those two items, closing loopholes, being specific. Secondary target was, we say the same thing over and over and over. We probably say it 4 or 5 different times in this ordinance. I just consolidated and for the lack of a better word, clustered like items for like, just like you've been seeing in these other zones that we've been rewriting and redoing. So we've got a new table that's in here that kind of goes over different the uses that are allowed with agritourism, as well as standards that are allowed or required. One of the things that I kind of teetered back and forth on how much effort I wanted to put into in this was where we have non-agricultural uses allowed in agritourism. I know that was a sensitive point, and I tried to make it clear that all of them have to be in some way ag-related. All of those accessory uses need to be ag-related. But there's still things like a lodging house. So I went away from the term bed and breakfast in this. There's a whole bunch of unique phrases and unique definitions and terms just for this 10-page ordinance. I got rid of as many of those unique verbiages as I could in favor of what we already have in our ordinance. So agritourism, bed and breakfast, I just replaced with lodging house because it was pretty much the same thing. There's something called a special occasion center or something like that. I just call that an event center. So just using like for like terms that we already have, we don't need to reinvent any words here.
Is a bed and breakfast the same as a lodging house? Because a lodging house also to me says hotel, but a bed and breakfast is someone's home that you rent a room and they feed you and you sleep there. And
There is a definition for lodging house and there is a definition for hotel.
okay,
And there is a definition for bed and breakfast. So if we wanted to go back to bed and breakfast, I just don't recommend we go back to a unique bed and breakfast agritourism.
it's fine. I haven't read the definitions. I'm going off what you said. And to me, lodging house and bed and breakfast do not necessarily mean the same thing. Or to your point of being specific, a lodging house can also mean
A bed and
Hotel.
breakfast or,
an
yeah, okay.
inn, a motel, there's a lodging house.
So we'll go over those definitions to see the differences there. What else do I have here? Reformat, eliminate language and phrasing that's not keeping, redundancies, got rid of some of the fluffy stuff and tried not to substantially change the greater intent of the ordinance. So let's dive into it with all that in mind.
Can we all agree that the greater intent of the ordinance is to enable farms to operate?
To
So,
make some additional income beyond farming income.
yeah, so, what, when we say greater intent, is like, okay, I have apiary and I operate it and I honestly, I sell an apiary experience where we train people to come and get in the suits and go get the hunting and do classes and that kind of thing. And the goal is to and help that grow through, this ordinance. Do we all agree that that's the goal? The goal is not to just create loopholes, it's to enable specific farming to grow, right? That's what we all agree.
So you had a word in there, Charlie, that, or a couple words, that this is over and above whatever the farming is, right? And that's what you're saying.
Basically, that the main but first you do this, and this is something else.
Yeah, and that something else cannot overwhelm or overcome the farming, keep farming.
It's
'Cause if you
supplemental,
stop, you-
But the hard part we run into is it can be more profitable.
It can be more profitable, yep.
because we're okay with that. We just don't want you to, like, we don't want this, the problem, and it's really hard, I can imagine this was difficult to write, because it's like, how do you say, you know what, it's all right for you to have a tourist attraction for people to come learn about bees. They even stay on your property and, you know, overnight. And then have you go, well, we found that people just want to come stay and then leave, so we're just gonna stop doing bees.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to avoid.
Yep.
So,
Accessory and incidental, those are the words that I used.
He's given a great lead into your definition for agritourism.
Yes, so I want to do two things. Let's read the definition of agritourism and then let's read the purpose and intent statement, and then we'll go back to definitions again.
Sorry, hang on. So I get it if all of a sudden you stop doing the bees. But if you put a hotel and you got like the little inn because you wanted, you know, this accessory or this supplement to your bee farm, you still manage the bees, but now basically you're running a hotel and you're just like a part-time beekeeper. Is that okay? You just switched completely from farming and like the supplement is now the bee.
that's the hard part of it.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Because when you, I'm like, what if they don't stop the bees? But really, they're just hotel owners now.
Let's go through the definition. and-
Yes, it'll
Okay.
answer all those
It'll help,
questions.
but also where there is vaguenesses, I mean, that's why we have Cortland
Mhm.
to help
That's the
us.
hard part, that when we talked about this before, it was like, well, yeah, like,
Mhm.
we would prefer this to stay, this to be there for that, and then, you know, if it becomes that, then they need to resubmit, you know, they become out of violation, right? When it becomes just a hotel and they ancillary do bees, somehow we draw that line and say, okay, now you need to apply to be in that zone,
Mhm.
be a hotel.
Their hive dies and now it's just a hotel. That's when we send Iris out there to say, sorry, shut the hotel down. Sorry that you got
Well,
a big empty building.
Or they just make enough honey
Until
for
you-
personal
until you get
use.
more
I mean,
bees.
unless someone's going in and like really, you know, deep diving into their business, how do you even?
So, it does talk about for commercial resale.
Okay.
So the agriculture needs to be for commercial
Okay.
resale. Okay,
I want to describe a place I stayed in Bavaria. Or I guess it's Austria, it's outside of Salzburg. And this is a farm. But they have kind of a motel thing, big dining room, but there's the farm there. When you eat there, you're eating a lot of the products from the farm, their cheese, their milk, their bread, all the stuff is right there. You walk outside and there are the cows. And so
Mhm.
is that agritourism?
this says that is
Or is that farm to table restaurant like Napa?
both.
When I have a hotel and I just grow some grapes in the back and I call that a winery, I'm really just a hotel.
Get to it, the Farmland Assessment Act addresses a whole lot of that stuff, because if you're not meeting the Farmland Assessment Act, you're done, you're not doing this,
Okay,
right?
yep, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And there, we added a few more standards in to make sure it's not just farmland assessment, but that's a big one. Okay, we ready? So definition of agritourism. The term agritourism means a use accessory to an agricultural use, which can provide a means of diversifying agricultural income through broadening the agricultural uses offerings and adding value to its agricultural product. An agritourism use operates more than 6 consecutive or non-consecutive days per year and provides products, activities, and other uses that are clearly related and incidental to the agricultural use. You feel good about that?
No,
Oh,
I don't see any reason to limit it to 6. I mean, you gotta have at least 6.
let's say one,
Just one.
you've got to be an agricultural,
I mean, it's gotta be all the
Operation.
same, but you can do it one day a year.
everybody else
You
okay
can
with that?
do the,
What,
you have to be in agriculture all the time, but you could do your special
the
thing.
tourism part?
Tourism, what you're saying.
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I heard that the other way around.
Agritourism use
I'm gonna
operates,
give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say something happens on this farm, the bees swarm. They only swarm one day a year. So when they swarm, we're gonna pass out and all the kids will come over and see the bee swarm.
get
Yeah,
stung.
that's a great point. The agritourism part, right, whether,
Yep.
let's say it's a hotel,
Mhm.
you're saying they have to stay in the hotel. You have to have people in the hotel for 6 days or more. We're saying, well, no, it could just be one day.
Yep, so looking on line 24 and 25, I've just stricken So I've stricken some words, so now it reads to say, an agritourism use, skip a bunch, provides products, activities, and other uses that are clearly related to and incidental to an agricultural use.
24, 25 on the black line.
I like it.
Okay. Okay, now that is the definition of agritourism. Let's talk about the purpose and intent of the agritourism ordinance. Page 6 of 22. I won't get past
We had line 36 while we're there.
36. Do you mind if we come back to that? As far as the term farm tour goes, I think that's a little, it's a little compared to making sure we get the intent correct. I do plan on coming back though. I don't plan on bouncing around the whole time.
Where do you have us going?
Okay, go to page 6
Of the line.
of the red line. Yeah, sorry, page 6, line 212, or for whoever has black line. Black line, it's section 108-21-1, purpose and intent. You see here, I struck the entire purpose and intent statement that was there before, and I rewrote it. There's still quite a bit of the same things or same themes in it, but just stated a little more clearly, I think. The county desires to create a culture that supports and celebrates its agrarian heritage and open spaces in the unincorporated areas. This chapter's purpose is to do this by providing owners of agricultural operations, the ability to generate additional income from land uses that are not otherwise allowed in the zone, provided those uses are accessory, incidental, and inextricably related. That's going to be an important term. Inextricably related to the on-site agricultural operation. The intent of this chapter is to create allowances and regulations that govern agriculture-oriented land uses that cater to tourists and other visitors coming to the site for recreational, educational, gastronomical, or similar agricultural-oriented attraction. Concerns, questions, comments? Okay, hopefully that.
What say you?
Yeah.
If he's good, I'm good.
But we went over this when we did the little farm, like the little event building on the pumpkin patch
Yep.
in Huntsville, right? Because they wanted to have school classrooms come and pick a pumpkin and do whatever. So now we're just tightening everything up.
Okay, that's right. That's exactly right. Okay. If there's no further questions on purpose and intent, let's go back to definitions. I'm still not sold on the idea that we need all these agritourism specific definitions, but I kept them in here just for the time being. For most of them, even though they're not in green line, they're in blue line. Most of them are already existing. I left a comment off to the side that says moved from somewhere else to here, just so you know that that's what we're looking at.
You can do, there's lawful.
So
There, would you like some pizza? There's plenty of food. There's water and pizza and whatnot.
do you have language that says include but are not limited to the following?
Elsewhere in the code,
Well, as we go through this definition, agritourism means this use. And then you list events, farm tour, fee fishing, etc. It might be appropriate to put here, including but not limited to the following.
sure.
If somebody's gonna come up with some farm use that we didn't list here.
Oh, you mean these definitions here?
This is the farm tour one, because there's that language is in the agritourism event facility.
Mhm. So I've got something better for you, a little bit deeper in the ordinance. It's a table that specifically says what an agritourism use is and is not. So it lists the uses very clearly and plainly in there.
Okay, but we don't wanna limit it to things we haven't.
Correct, okay.
That's the hard part. I think that's the balance you're trying to strike here, right, Charlie, is that if we need to limit it somewhat so that we don't get blindsided by.
We want to close loopholes and be specific, but leave it open to things we haven't thought of.
Generally specific.
This has to come forward with an application, and their application could announce something new for consideration.
And you can still put conditions on a conditional use permit as per the property, right? You still have another chance. You're just trying to get the code
Or if you create a table with limited, a specific limited number of uses right now, somebody could come in with a text amendment application in the future. And if the county decides that that is an appropriate use, at that time, they could change the code to allow it. That's an option. I'm not saying that's the only way to
I'm
do
gonna
it. but-
suggest a simple edit on line 27. Including but not limited to the following described uses. Because it all has to fit. The first part of that paragraph. That says.
Is it easier to say?
Other uses that are clearly related and incidental to the agricultural use. Such as the following, or
If you leave the door open, is it harder to say no to something that's a little wacky or easier to say yes to something that's different and reasonably good?
Oh,
No, I think it's a lot
to-
harder to say no.
It's harder to say no.
Yeah,
If you leave the door
I
open.
think it's just as easy to say yes,
The
but
no
yeah,
is-
the no is the problem, right?
The no
If you
gets
don't want
worse.
one that you don't want.
The no is already here.
Yeah, so you,
Clearly related and incidental to the agricultural use.
Okay.
That's the no. If it doesn't meet that simple definition, it's out no matter what it is. But a text amendment is an expense and a big hassle and a time consuming deal.
Yeah, I wanna hit what you're talking about on line 402 instead of putting it in the definition. 402 is the introduction to the uses that are allowed. So we could say these uses are allowed. We could also say, or similar types of uses as may be approved by the land use authority or something like that.
Well, humor me and just put that simple language in 27. Because that takes care of it. Because we're illustrating what a use that is clearly related and incidental to the agricultural use is an event facility as described, a farm tour, bee fishing, bee hunting. We're illustrating things that fit.
Mhm.
But there could be other things that fit, that we don't want some guy that's barely making it on his farm to have to go through months of waiting and the expense of a text amendment.
I think,
If it's not clearly related and incidental to his farm, he's gonna get a no.
Yeah.
That's easy.
okay,
We're looking for simplicity.
I'm gonna find a way to do what you're asking without doing what you're asking, because we have a very specific list, and if I'm gonna go through and list everything again, it's just
But then
redundancy.
you make your specific list
Mhm.
congruent with your definitions.
when you mentioned there was a lot of repetitive language. I was gonna say, that's. Lawyers need to do that because it makes it extra clear.
Except for when you go try and change it, you have to remember where you said the
Yeah,
exact same
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
So maybe allowed at discretion. Okay. Let me try and do that. See what I can work out for you next time. Okay.
Can I tell you that line 36 while we were
Mhm.
Sure about line 36.
Mhm.
describe current?
Line 36.
Educate the public about current agricultural practices and technology. He wants current out.
Great point.
Take away current.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what about blacksmith shop? We talk about the past.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If you go to a farm tour, you're gonna see a whole bunch of old stuff.
There you
Go out to the Gar Ranch, they tell you how it used to be.
go. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so agritourism events facility on line 29, was there any other questions about that kind of facility? Okay, farm tour already mentioned, fee fishing. I don't know that we actually need to say fee fishing, but it's here. Agritourism, glamorous camping, I left that in there. Which incidentally, there were terms that were
Let
like,
me ask you, fishing you had there, would that mean you'd have to have a fish farm?
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah, and we do actually have an agritourism fish farm on this side of town here. And let's
So
see,
it's not in the Weaver County zone, right?
Yeah.
it is, it's unincorporated.
Unincorporated North Ogden.
It's a, yeah, it's.
Like a little island.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's why all the roads are terrible right there. North Ogden doesn't take care of any of them.
Doesn't that cover the concept that you can come across my land to fish down there if you pay me a fee?
I don't know that you necessarily even need that, but sure. Like,
So you don't have to have a fish farm, but it has to be fishing related,
yeah, if
or
you,
land related.
I don't know that we need to make you, if you wanted to say you're the landowner and I'm the fisherman, I don't know that you would necessarily need to get a conditional use permit to do that. I guess money is changing hands.
Yeah, there's,
I think it can
All
probably
right.
vary on how much you're doing it, right?
Sure.
If he does it.
If it's under the amount that you have to report to the IRS, does it matter? I don't know. But yeah, absolutely. I think if it's under,
$600.
is that what it is, 600 a year?
Yeah. Actually, I think it is now, but it was like $60.
Okay,
Where are we?
Your employees or gift cards.
so flipping over to page 2, agritourism health farm.
Gift card, tax out.
Are we help them? Are you expecting questions on the definition bill?
Yeah.
47? Isn't that a rural and spa-like environment?
Mhm. How would you like to see it, James?
I don't know what a rural spa is fancy deal in the city.
I have a hard time with this whole definition. So this isn't one that I wrote. This is one that I just moved from elsewhere in the code.
Uh-huh.
I'm just thinking like yoga with horses, I guess.
Oh, like goat yoga.
This actually fits what my applicant's doing.
Oh, okay.
So wasn't a big deal because he is going to have a pond that you can jump in, a cold plunge, a sauna, a steam room in the basement, a whole gym, like that actually fits. So that those can, there's a whole.
Is that related to agriculture?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just saying, I didn't add it in the code. No, I'm saying within the lodge, it allows you to be able to take care of yourself while you're there, while then you go learn about agriculture.
So health farm, let's just read the definition.
Uh-huh.
The term means a farm,
A farm
a farm
building.
building designed for the purpose of providing active health and wellness education or physical exercise and diet regimens that can improve one's quality of life in a rural and spa-like environment. Health and wellness opportunities may consist of, here you go, Jeff, but are not limited to, general and specialized exercise, wellness and nutritional classes, consultations. I hate the slashes. Organic cooking classes or workshops, yoga, meditation, and massage therapy. So this is,
I think it fix the funny part if you take Ann down and put a word.
That actually does fit.
rural or spa-like.
I spent the last 2 years researching wellness. This commissioner had an applicant, actually, but
How is
that
this?
actually is like, you're seeing this a lot. Rancho La Puerta is doing the same thing. A lot of these big ranches are doing this and teaching how do you grow your own food and then live a better, healthier life? And how do you incorporate it, not just in agriculture, how do you bring everything into one? That, again, this is separate from the applicant, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
So let's answer the question, how is this farm-like, right? And let's go real quick to, what is it? Sorry, when I reorganized the table back here, I did not put them in alphabetical order.
I noticed, that's right here on page 11.
I can see, I can find a way to make it farm-like, but what is the
Oh,
word? Incidental to the farm is, I think, where you're losing me.
Yeah, so agritourism health farm limited to wellness. So you have to have a certain amount of acreage first off, you've got it, so small, medium, large, and ranch side.
Problem with small too, because it was like, you probably fix this.
So garden is 3 acres.
But that doesn't, I think that's gonna run afoul of the Farmland Assessment Act unless they meet a really high bar that says 80% of their entire income comes from those less than 5 acres. That's a high bar. So that, and I think it's misleading to have the garden in there and maybe even the family. When you read the Assessment Act, you could have 5 acres, but that wouldn't include the land you use for your home.
Right,
Which means you'd have to have bigger than a 5 acre parcel that you own. So somehow you have to, I think you have to convey this Farmland Assessment Act and what it entails a little bit more clearly, or else people will be misled.
We go a little bit actually more strict when it comes to what an agricultural operation is. We say it's got to be an area, it's only the area that is currently in active agriculture or has been for the last year or something like
Right.
that. So we even go a little bit further. We don't just exclude a quarter acre or an acre or whatever for the house.
Right, but that garden or family would lead someone who owns a 5 acre piece
To think
to think they could do it. When they maybe could, but they would have to really show a heck of a lot of income.
But those two things are mutually exclusive.
So,
You can do a farm, you can have income, you don't have to do farmland assessment act. You don't have to be in Greenbelt.
you do if for this, right?
Right. Yeah, per the existing ordinance. It's the property, in order to do agritourism, the property has to currently be in Greenbelt. Under the Farmland Assessment Act.
Is that important to have that there?
So you
I
guys,
think if you don't, you're gonna get people trying to pull all sorts of situations.
Why? If the guy's got 3 acres and he's doing all of these things, why not encourage that? Just because he can't qualify to be in Greenbelt,
Then he's not,
but he's doing the farm thing.
that he doesn't meet the definition.
Yeah, of
Well,
the,
he doesn't meet the definition of what?
of right here, this first line that you like, be clearly related to incidental to the agricultural use, right?
Well, agricultural use, but you don't have to be in Greenbelt to have an agricultural use.
So do you want it to be for hobby farms?
Yeah,
or
but
real-
if I grow tomatoes in my backyard,
Yeah, I think if you do that, you're gonna.
does
open
that
up
qualify
the
me
valley
to go run a
to
yoga studio?
all sorts of crazy things, which I don't think the valley wants. I think the valley would like
It doesn't matter what
agritourism.
the valley wants, it matters what the rights of the individual are. If they're trying to.
But like, but are we because, hold on, like, I guess let's separate this. We've got an operator who is operating that same bee farm on 3 acres,
Mhm.
right? And they're doing exactly what I said, they're taking people out, giving them experience. Obviously, we're trying to encourage that, but that wouldn't really fit in this code, right? Is it against the code? They're charging money, it's just not so big, it's relatively small.
I think,
Or for example, my daughters are, here's a good example, my daughters are paying for horseback riding lessons. Should that have to be a commercial operation? Should we have to rezone? Should we have to have agritourism? I don't think anybody's gonna complain that I'm sending my daughters over to somebody's house on 3 acres, or even, I think they're only 1.5 acres, to ride their horse in the backyard for an hour, right? I don't think anybody's gonna complain about that.
Are they making money?
I'm sure she is, yeah. So technically she'd be in violation, but is it wrong? No, so I don't know. I think there's a line here, and what we're trying to prevent is community having a problem with it, right? That's really what we're trying to prevent. We want to encourage it. So how do we do that? How do we say, this is, a 3 acre thing where it's not a big deal, is not a problem. Now, a 10 acre, and you're gonna have new people there every night, you're gonna have pollution, whether it be light pollution or, lots
Noise.
of cars, noise pollution that affects everyone else. How do we separate the two?
So we've got the standards, right, that say a garden, family, a small, or as large, whatever. We get in there and we say, you are allowed in a 3 acre family, you're allowed to do just these things. With a small, you're allowed to do maybe a few more things because it's more acreage and a few more things. So as it gets bigger, you're seeing more possibilities. The other thing that I noticed in here that didn't seem to make a lot of sense, and Trevor, you brought it up to me at one point, is I think it was the bed and breakfast distance or separation from adjacent property. The larger the property gets, doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get a greater distance from the edge of the property, right? And so you could still have a loud, almost hotel right next to a residence if we don't put specific standards in here. Now, I did put that in there. I think it's 300 feet now, closer to a home on an adjacent parcel than 300 feet. Question will be, is that gonna be enough? For like a large lodge, for example.
But I think that, I guess we already have so let's go to a different example. There's an art studio that's operating. probably doesn't make, it's probably not in compliance, right? Well, it doesn't really bother anybody, and they probably don't make enough money to really try and fight this. And I think that might be the differentiator. Like, once you start making enough money that you need to make it more legit, then you'll come in and make this work.
Now you're going into why zoning exists at all, right? Because before zoning, it was, by the way, I'm agreeing with you, just in case that wasn't there. Before zoning, it was just nuisance law, right? You're doing something now. The kids who are playing violin at your house for profit are really driving me nuts, and I am going to sue you to the courts. Courts got so overwhelmed with all the land use issues that at the point that it came to a city creating a zoning ordinance, going over the three-way court system, that is one of their, the Supreme Court's final findings was courts will be overwhelmed with nuisance claims as we continue to grow as a population if we don't enable some kind of a policing power like this. So that was in Village of Euclid versus Ampler really. But that's the exact point. And if I were making the rules, all of them by myself, I would say, here are the rules. None of them apply if you're not bothering anyone. As soon as you start cross that line and you're bothering someone, as evidenced by them being bothered, not as evidenced by what you think you're doing, you know, then the rules apply. But it's hard to do that and still make everyone happy.
But I thought of a good example here. What I think is a good example is the bees. You don't need 5 acres to do bees.
And I think
But bees don't qualify
Yeah.
under
they have a different.
Farmland Assessment Act.
They have a different category for bees. It's a different structure. So these are their own thing.
Well, this is Kevin's example.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Kevin. No, Kevin. Because these beekeepers, they may have a bee extraction house on 5,000 square foot piece of their 2-acre lot. But they got their bee hives, colonies spread all over the valley, and they bring them in, and that's where they teach their classes, come in and we'll let you help extract honey. But they're not in Greenbelt.
That's the thing is. The extraction building is not under the Greenbelt Farm Assessment Act. It does not qualify. If I remember reading the way that's written.
Why do we have that in there? Seems like it's been covered. It doesn't matter for.
I'm just
Just
telling
asking, I'm
you,
just
if you
saying.
got that, clearly bees are an agricultural use. They're necessary for.
They were contemplated, right? By the rest of the
The
ordinance.
whole idea here is for agritourism, for people to continue doing agriculture and they're. To keep doing that so that they don't sell it off, right?
Yeah.
Keep that presence in the valley.
Yeah.
So if we force that, to your point, the 3s and the 5s, they just don't work. Again, this particular applicant, it doesn't matter, so it's already there, but for future applicants. It does matter.
I mean, we like to say, gee, if you got a bunch, if you're crazy about bees and you're teaching kids how to do bees. Why wouldn't we let you do this on your 3-acre, 4-acre?
Can we just put that all subject to conditional approval? You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, like, all right, like, you were doing horseback riding lessons and it's getting pretty big. Someone complained. You can come in and say, look, this is what I do. This is how I do it. You know, yeah, there's no category for it, but will you approve it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you have an impact in the moment, there's a noise impact on the conditional use. You guys always write them, right? You're gonna do for noise mitigation.
Mhm.
Someone's not mitigating the noise anymore in the conditional use permit, well, then it's out of compliance, right? And it has to come back for, you could revoke it, or
Yeah.
you could go into revocation, right?
It's hard though with conditional use permits, like we've mentioned before, to deny them. Unless it's a life safety issue. And it might be hard to pinpoint noise to a life safety issue because you can do some type of mitigation to that.
It was just all impact, not life safety, I thought impact.
Unreasonable, so.
Unreasonable.
I spent 18 months with Cache County for revocation for a beaver pond that got slightly grown, so to your definition, it just. They looked at that as.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, why don't we have a noise?
We don't.
Why don't?
No. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, well, I mean,
We don't have enough.
So I guess, long story short, can we keep all
There's
of
always
that,
a-
but have
in the
the
valley.
small stuff be looked at
At
conditions?
10 o'clock,
I
yes.
mean, because our real goal, we aren't trying to, we're not trying to stop people from having music lessons.
Maybe
in
your
their home
HOA
or
does.
whatever. We're trying to say, hey, look, I mean, reality is, if I could speak openly, we're trying to say, look, we want agriculture to succeed. But we really don't want you to start a hotel on the basis that you're doing agriculture. That's really all we're trying to say here.
I'll work with Cortland a little bit. Case by case it gets a little bit sketchy because it can be an open door. However, I think Cortland and I could probably figure out some objective standards to apply to say, this is the bare minimum, like these are the rules. If the planning commission wants to consider above and beyond, maybe we can write some rules about how to do that.
I think, well, and keep the good stuff that you've
Yes.
done. Like in that smaller stuff where it is kind of like, well, what do we do? Then it becomes a,
Yeah, so I'm specifically talking about, so lines 254 through 264 on the red line, which is section 108-21-2, part C. These are the minimum qualifications in order to be allowed to do an agritourism operation. And this is where the mandatory requirement for the Farmland Assessment Act comes in. I'm thinking maybe after number 4, we just add in one between 4 and 5 that says other farm-like uses reasonably anticipated in Weaver County area may be approved on a case-by-case basis as long as, and then we get
well, I mean,
some criteria.
these other qualifications are good qualifications, right? I mean, own the property, sold an agricultural product, more than 1 year, those kind of things, like, oh, so you've done these things, it's been relatively small, right? Now you want to come make this legit and, you know, case by case, right? You have 3 acres, you have whatever, yeah.
Okay.
2 and 4, big contradictory.
Number 2 says the agricultural operator has commercially sold an agricultural product that was produced on the subject property for greater than 1 year. Number 4 says the subject property is currently or will be within the next growing season producing an agricultural product in an amount that meets or exceeds. Reason why I said it that way is because
There's just a will, and then it says there has to be a.
if they're coming to ask in January, they either did last year or they're going to.
I think the Farmland Assessment Act also has provisions, if you're not producing for a farm-related reason, so sometimes fields need to not produce for various reasons, there's a term for that.
Yeah.
Then you're still okay, if you didn't produce under the auspices of the act.
I
Yeah.
can see the goal here of what we were saying earlier, which was like, we want people, basically, if you're doing agricultural reality, you've been doing that for probably more than a year or 2, right? This isn't gonna be new. That's
So
a good barrier to entry for an Airbnb.
Yep.
Agritourism is a problem, right? That's.
I want to make sure I got the standards right. Comfortable with you guys. You have to have owned the property for the last 2 years and produced agriculture for the last year, at least within that growing season, in order to qualify for this. You guys comfortable? Do you want to do 3 years, 10 years, 0 years?
I think that's fine, that's well done. But I think you're telling us in addition, you have been qualified under the Farmland Assessment Act,
Or,
or.
yep,
You didn't
or,
clarify the ors and the ands
yep,
here.
yes,
So there's-
that's, I think, the big issue. So I'm putting or and I'm putting a big circle around. If it's not in compliance, it needs to be a reasonable agricultural operation. We'll figure out what those words are.
Other ag operation.
Yeah, those are gonna, I mean, we don't wanna stop some person who's doing a hobby farm thing that no one has any problem with, more or less.
If you're selling produce, you make it, you know, if you're a big garden, that's a different permit from the county, right? If you're just like a roadside stand,
Yes.
that's completely different. That's
Produce
not
stand.
this.
Right. You could get a produce stand through this.
But today you wouldn't have to.
It'd be easier just to go through the
Right.
typical zone. Yep, you got it. Okay. Back to definitions. We good? Sorry, we're bouncing, but I think we're making progress.
I got a question on 71.
line 71.
Hey, Charlie, everybody, can we make this happen in 10 minutes?
No, but we can come back in our next meeting.
Okay.
So, 10 minutes, good?
I think so. I don't want to stay till 8:30.
71?
Yeah, 71 says you can only sell things that were produced in Weaver County.
Yeah, that's in your existing ordinance. You want to delete that?
I would suggest delete that.
Now, this is if you have specifically an agricultural product store.
Wait. We're doing this for the valley.
Why would you want to open up?
Okay, I'm thinking of a couple of things. Okay, you got this, kids come in and they get friendly, they come to farm camp or something. They may come and stay overnight at farm camp and look at the stars, whatever. And you have some resources for them there. You've got some books on how to be a natural farmer. Well, this wasn't created in Weaver County, it was produced through publishers in.
The books,
Yeah.
right?
We don't want to limit a guy from selling books on how to be a good farmer or stuff like that. There's no reason to limit that to Weaver County.
Sorry, so you're saying absolutely, so
Just let him sell, he's selling his own stuff and he can include.
he can
things
sell some
that
other
is
stuff too.
elsewhere.
Okay.
We're right next to Morgan County. They may have some unique things over in Morgan County and they're trading back and forth. I'm selling my whatever over in Morgan County and you're selling yours in my little store.
You have to take out that whole system of multiple vendors.
No, multiple vendors is you have different.
Vendors.
Okay, well, we have to fix that. Good point.
Yeah, you have to take out
So,
quite a bit.
well, let's be clear. An agricultural product store is the farm owner is the vendor. You're not bringing more vendors in.
No, but you might be.
Hold on,
Products
please go.
from somewhere else.
Yeah, so that single vendor can then vend that product.
Exactly.
But then other types of store, we've got also a gift shop, which frankly sell whatever you want in your gift shop. So maybe with your agricultural product store that could only sell things that's in Weaver County, you also have right next door to it, in the same building, in the same facility, a gift shop.
Convenience store, whatever.
Yep, and then, so there's 3 tiers. There's agricultural product store, which is just the farmer selling his stuff. There's a gift shop, which actually doesn't have any limits, and then there is a market, which is essentially a grocery store. You're just limited to, I think it was like 200 square feet, 400 square feet, something like that.
Okay.
Just so it doesn't become.
So basically, and why we're doing that is to say, okay, a agricultural product store might be on 3 acres, just for example, but a gift shop can be on 20 or 40.
That's right. That's exactly right. So we could
Because then it makes,
smaller to bigger.
yeah, it makes more sense.
I know that some of these small operations, they sell each other stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, this guy does honey, this guy does something else.
Mhm.
Money filled with it all.
Ag- Asparagus, this guy does corn,
Mhm.
and they.
Yeah.
So you're
But it's made in Weaver County.
you're the farmer and I'm a different farmer and I come to you and I wholesale a product that then you're gonna vend out.
Yeah.
Using agricultural product store. If you wanted to vend out more, or like you and I go in together,
Small operation, I don't have 20 acres to have a bookstore. I'm
Yeah.
just
so
putting in my little farm camp
Yep.
and.
agricultural product store,
Because I don't sell,
perfect. And it is allowed for the small, it's actually for the smallest farm type.
but it's
3 acre
not
farm
produced
type,
in Weaver County.
and not produced in Weaver County, striking that. Got that part. Somewhere. What line was that on again?
Let's just put local. Because Davis County can be local, Box Elder County. What are you doing?
The local can also be just the valley. Like if we're, if the goal is
That's just
specific,
it, like-
specific,
So you come and propose it, and you're like.
Why limit
Could you just put, use your best
Well, that's what I
intent?
mean, is it's like,
it?
hey,
Why limit
I'm just saying, use your best intent to do local.
why limit it? The only reason to say local is because we're encouraging local anyway.
it? Well,
use your best intent, like in a contract, that seems very.
I do that all the time. I put it in a contract.
Do you
I'm like, I
really?
will use my best intent, meaning I'm not contractually bound, but I'm gonna, I had to.
We say good faith efforts.
Good faith.
Sorry.
In that, I deleted Weber County. Those are the only 2 words that I deleted in that definition. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Commonly owned and or independent or unaffiliated farms.
I got my little farm store. Christmas is coming up. I made a deal with Harry and David. They're gonna send me down some pears that I can sell in my farm store.
I think that is exactly the intent of this agricultural operation. Perfect. Good. Was that 10 minutes yet?
And 81, why did we strike that?
Such a facility may afford meals and overnight lodging facilities. It's too specific. That is a standard that is written in here. I wanted to make sure if we're talking about meals and lodging, it's written into the standards of the ordinance, not the definition. That makes sense?
So what you've done here would not, I'm thinking of a farm camp. Kids come stay overnight,
Mhm.
have meals and stuff.
Now, that wouldn't be part of an agricultural research and education center, but education classes, I think, are still allowed. Farm camp, I think, would fall under that. And so lodging could still be done under that. Okay, actually, let's just make sure, I'm gonna put a note off the side to make sure kid farm camp is still okay. Or adult farm camp, right? You know, it's funny, nowhere in our code do we have anything that says dude ranch. A lot of the older ordinances still have the term dude ranch in it.
One more thing, 41, 49,
49?
149.
One.
One.
Got it?
I should get to strike 5 and put 1.
Okay. If you're okay with that, that actually makes things a little easier and more consistent across the board here.
What's the number for?
So lodging house. The term lodging house, also referred herein as a boarding house, means a building designed for temporary lodging for compensation, in which no provision is made for cooking in any individual guest room or suite. Unless otherwise more specifically provided in this land use code, a lodging house has between, and it says 5 and 15 guest rooms, and what I'm hearing is strike 5 and put 1, between 1 and 15 guest rooms.
Hold on a second.
Just for a comment.
Out of curiosity, if there's one, did we just make a short-term rental?
Sort of.
I think it has to be 2 rooms, because you have to have the owner plus.
So these rooms would be guest rooms.
Oh, sorry, okay, guess.
Lodging, compensation.
But the idea is, and this isn't, again, this applicant, it's the idea is to preserve agriculture.
Yes.
And so if you do a kids camp, did you create one? Yeah, but for the purpose of agriculture.
And to,
It's not the same as like doing.
I hear you. So like I can rent out rooms in my place
well, hang on, before you go too deep, the rest of the
because it
ordinance
helps my
does,
farm.
it does say that in order to do a lodging house, the farm operator has to be on site at all times that you have guests. And so.
Right, renting a room
with
out of my house.
STR.
Huh?
Which is different than STR.
that, STR, you don't have to be there.
It has to be agriculturally related.
Go back to the purpose and intent, first part of it, you won't qualify unless it's like
Okay,
for this.
and if you do a farm to table dinner
And that's
as an amenity of
That's
that.
kind of what we're
snack.
saying is, okay.
Okay,
We're saying,
all right.
yeah, you can do 1 night rentals if you are doing farm to
Okay.
table dinners and you're teaching them about your farm that you operate
Perfect.
or your bee.
I bring it up to make sure there's an answer for it. Because someone's gonna say, they just made.
And you have to have been doing it for 2 years, or you have to own the farm for 2 years, you have to have been growing for a year, right? It's not like, I just buy a property and start.
Mhm.
We've got a little bit of time between now and our next meeting. Would it be fair to ask you guys to go through the rest, give me some comments and questions within the next week? And then maybe we can do some dialogue online, just over email, back and forth, and hopefully within the next 2-3 weeks, I can punch back out a new draft. So
Did you email the black copy?
Yeah, it'll be to the bottom.
did I only email the black copy?
No, you emailed the red line.
Okay.
Counselor, can you make that?
So just to be clear, we're still talking about accessory and incidental to a real farming operation,
Yes.
not just some tricky way to make some money because you have a nice garden.
Right.
Right?
That's, I mean, It's pretty cut and dry. You'd have to go through some pretty.
No, there is a nice garden. There is an allowance for like a community garden. I think this ordinance called it a rent-a-row. I changed that. That was a little too kitschy for me. But where other people
Create
can.
that, yeah, within your own farming operation,
Right,
not as
That's
its
an
own-
existing farming.
Yeah,
operation.
right, not as its only thing,
right. It has to be on a property that
an
already has.
existing real farm.
Yep, yep. Okay, good.
Thanks,
So
Jim.
those are then, please, I guess.
Send them both, but label it, line.
Okay.
Red line.
The new version that comes out. Okay, you got it.
Send it to, but it's sent to me anyway, I just didn't send all of it.
Sure.
Adjourn?
That's-
What is